Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Let's Talk with David. I'm really excited about this episode. I am excited about my guest. This has been something that's been germinating and marinating that God's been breathing on. And I think you're going to really get so much from this conversation. So if you have to cut away before the end, you're definitely going to want to come back and get the full conversation. So welcome to the studio. My special guest, Kerah, Riel. We are getting real today. And here we go. Ta-da! Hello, Kerah.
Hi, it's fantastic to be doing this after conversations about it happening. And so, yeah, I'm ready to go and light this up and have a fantastic conversation.
Yes.
Thank you
I
for
mean, you
asking
guys.
me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's truly an honor. I am really, my insides are really excited because what you carry, what you are imparting, what you are teaching is so rich, and I know that I'm feeding on it in a really, really satisfying way. So that's rewarding in and of itself. Um, but it's also just a very timely topic. And I'll kind of explain how I even found you. But you guys can tell from her backdrop there. This conversation is about water and so many different elements and aspects and facets of it. My journey to finding you was actually started last summer. Um, one of my best friends had a dream that was all about water, and when they were unpacking it, it was various aspects of water, but it was like dirty water. Water needed to be cleaned and restored, and all these various aspects to it. And then her mom, my spiritual mom, started getting just downloads from the Holy Spirit about water, 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 all these aspects. She was deep diving into researching water. We were watching videos about aspects of water we'd never known before. And then I asked her this question about water being such an essential element of our living beings. We're made up of water. The earth is covered in water. But what came up in my brain was this whole idea of water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink, right? Because we're surrounded by salt water. So it begged the question, why are we surrounded by something that's not good for us, right? What is it about salt water that we don't understand that we are missing out on? So anyway, my spiritual mom Shannon, she'd started listening to your series, and she was like, oh my gosh, you're gonna have to listen to Kerah. And so it has been so rich to have listened to what you're already sharing. And so anyway, thank you for making time out of your life and your schedule. I know you just finished an intensive in California, so thank you for being able to be here.
Hey, it's an honor. It's definitely a time where, I think for some of us we've been on journeys where maybe we felt like we were um not lone rangers, but it was very specific, like who we were in relationship with, and there probably was a lot of just relationships that you had for a long time really shifting and changing. And what I found is like this is a time where you're reconnecting, but you're really reconnecting with people who really resonate and carry a very like-minded frequency, and so you're able to go deep. There's there's something to having relationship, and the difference between surface relationships where how much you can talk about, but it's just such a celebration for me to be able to have these conversations with people, because there was a long time where, I mean, yeah, it's like crickets, and everyone's like, what? Just there was no grid for so long. But things have just really busted wide open. And so through that, I believe that that's why a lot of us are connecting. And just, not just for the benefits of whatever that looks like, which is fine. I've had a lot of that in my life though. And I've just I don't have time for that anymore.
Mhm.
I just really want rich, deep connections where, it's like how do we walk together in life, and how
Yep.
can I help you? How can we, walk together? And so that's been a celebration for me, is really finding people that I can go really deep with, and not just deep, but I feel like really challenge, like for myself too. I'm like, challenge me. Like I want to hear something that just like gets me like on the edge of my seat. Like, wait, what? I've never thought of that. I've never seen it like that. That's where I'm at. I'm like make me freak out for a minute. It's okay. I'm not going to get offended. I'm going to sit in it and go, whoa, okay. I have not seen it like that. And I just really embrace that. I'm so glad that we are, it's not a majority, but it's happening.
Yeah. Agreed. And so right on the heels of that dream and Shannon getting downloads and us encountering you, I was invited by a friend to a Zoom call of another friend who's launching a company into the world that's all about water. And even some of the divine elements of that unfolding were really interesting. But my response to the Lord about that was, I don't need something else to just be doing. And if you're directing me to this, great, you have my yes. However, I'm not doing this. And I even said, I'm not doing this alone. I'm not doing the Lone Ranger thing because I'm just ready to do this in community. Whatever I'm doing in community. And so, in my most intimate spiritual community, it is very much one of us gets something, we all are really looking at it together because as a community, we're just doing this that way. If I get something, they are coming on board or coming around it as well, and we're digesting it together. And it's just a much richer way to live. Um, I was a swimmer forever. I mean, I was a competitive swimmer, junior Olympic swimmer, so spent a lot of time in water. And I do, even on a spiritual and relationship sense, love the deep waters. Like I am deep waters, deep calls out to deep. I reach for the deep things in other people. In a spiritual sense, I always like to say, I swim at the deep end of the pool. And that's just where I'm comfortable. So I'm very much with you. The shallow is a starting place, and maybe there's a ministry assignment there, but where I feed and where I like to live are the deep waters.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think that what I found too is that even if people, maybe they haven't quite made like an outward transition, they will say to me, like, I maybe look like him in the shallow, but I'm actually over in the deep. And I laugh because it's just such a huge response that I get a lot, where people are, kind of, they're not maybe out and, expressing all of these thoughts and things, but they really do, like that is where they are at. If you ask them in an inward way, that is where they are. And so it's been really great because I really understand that I've just always been somebody who has said, I don't need to see it. I don't need for it to be formed. I'll just take that quantum leap and ask questions
Mhm.
later. That's just kind of who I am. So I understand that there are people who need that, and then they're like, but they are absolutely all for it. And so that's been a great thing to see. Is really see some people sometimes reach out to me, and I'm like, Really? Wow,
Mhm.
and yet they have just made this transition, but it's like they're still kind of hidden. They don't want people to know. But I understand it. I totally get it. And I always encourage people, like, look, it's a journey and it's a process, and but keep going into those deep places. Like, if that is what you really desire, keep going. And at some point you can just kind of sort of let the whole world know maybe how actually fringe you are.
Mhm.
But it's been really, like, it's that's been blowing my mind too, is just seeing people who, they really have made the transition. And so, yeah, it's encouraged me to kind of put a little bit more out there than probably what I normally would, because I'm a bit more, um of a private person, I guess, in the sense that um I'm not really like interested in having a following, like a mass following. That's definitely not what I'm doing this for.
Yep.
I really am not trying to, have a Facebook huge following and a YouTube huge following. And like, if that stuff happens, it just happens. But, I really actually have loved kind of being under the radar a little bit as I have,
Yep.
because then I just kind of do whatever I want. And, you
Well,
don't have like mass amount of people, having their opinions or whatever. So, but, it is what it is. Whatever happens, happens. And I've always told the Lord, like, I have my preferences, but it doesn't matter either way. I'm good with either. So,
yeah. No, and it shows. I mean, the way you conduct your teachings is very intimate, and you really care about those who are there and who are learning and asking questions. That shows. Your heart comes through. We see
oh,
you.
thank you.
So
I,
when I came across your content, one of the things that you said that caught my attention, given all of this leading up to finding you, was like the era of water and the age of hydrogen. And you even have it behind you, that the era of water. But you also said like you've been marinating in this revelation that Lord's been unpacking for you for like 6 years. Is that right?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say it's probably 7 with, with portions of it, probably 7, but 6 with water and, diving deeper into the periodic table. But it's been about 7 with the Hebrew language. So about 7 with the Hebrew language, that kind of, opened up, and it opened up into different ways because, and I'll talk about that. But yeah, it really has been an incredible journey, and it really just came out of, my deep cry to, experience more. And for me, I've always been able to sort of hear frequency. I see frequency. And so there was just always something about a particular frequency that I would just hear. And so things within the traditional church, I got to a point where I just kind of hit what I call the law of the lid. And I just said, I don't want that lid anymore. I don't want it. And so, yeah, it was basically smack dab in the middle of all of that, I heard the frequency. Finally, I heard a frequency that I was like, I have been hearing that for so long. And it was just that invitation that I just took a deep dive. But yeah, it's been an incredible journey for sure.
So take us there. What was the Lord indicating to you when he said this is the era of water?
So it actually began, I would say, with, sort of my realization of who I am. And, so, my first name is Kerah, but in the middle of me is my middle name, and that's Marie. But actually, if you understand that Marie is Latin, and it originates from Mary. But Mary originates because there actually, a lot of people know like Jesus's mother, as Mary, but actually there wasn't a Mary. It wouldn't have been Mary. It would have been Miriam.
Okay.
So my middle name, basically, if you go all the way to root, which I love root, I'm like, always get to the root because you're going to get gold. Um, is that I have Miriam in the middle of me. And I'm like, yep, that makes a lot of sense. And when that started to actually kind of be revealed to me in such a deep way, that's really when the Lord said, you've been born for this time. And he was like, this is the age of water. This is the age of Aquarius. And you've been born for this. And so he kind of began at first, I dove deep into the Hebrew language, and just really kind of did my due diligence of learning the letters. But then I was very much able to understand that Miriam, is basically, in Hebrew, you have the mem at the beginning of that, which is water. And then you have the final mem at the end of that, which is water. So everything about Miriam is water, and that's who she was in scripture. She was literally the reason that they had a well of water in the middle of the desert. It was because of Miriam and her, basically her priestly um, calling, her priesthood. She was called to be that water source. That's who she was. So Miriam's represent that. Obviously, Jesus's mother. I mean, she was a huge source of water in the sense that she was bringing the living water, for like literally the living water was coming through her womb.
Yeah.
So that just like broke open a huge, huge portion of my scroll, my destiny. And then it was just like, okay, well, what does this mean? And then it just, a lot of things began to make sense. Like I was like, wow, I really love water in the sense that it's okay to go to the desert, but I'm always like, have you ever noticed that like desert people they're very interesting people because the
Yeah.
further you get away from large bodies of water, people sort of, they forget who they are, and because water holds memory. So a lot of times, like when you need peace, when you need clarity, where do you go? A lot of people go to the beach. They sit or they'll sit next to a lake or so, because the frequency, what the water carries, sort of brings you back to a particular grounding foundation where you can
Yep.
like go, okay, like I can kind of find myself again. And I've always found that, like beach cities or certain places that are literally on the water, they're just diverse places of creativity, diverse people. People have, I think, a lot more sort of support, um, I guess, to like express themselves, be who they are, because
Yep.
there is a particular thing that water does, and it carries frequency, it carries memory. And so, yeah, so I started to see, like in my life, oh, if I don't feel good, what do I want to do? Immediately, I always like to get into a bath or a shower. If I want to, have a flow of creativity, I always find myself going, into the shower or into, go swimming or doing something like that, because I get some of my most creative ideas or things come up whenever I'm in water. So for me, I was like, wow, that really is a big portion of me and who I am, because I do have fire, but some people are just like total fire, like as an
Yeah.
element that is, they come with that full force. And so I do have that fire, but I have a particular purpose in why the water's so strongly in me.
Oh, that makes sense. And of course, any civilization would fight over water sources. And when you built a new city and new, like my family happens to be one of the families that settled and originated in Dallas. We were one of the OG families in Dallas, and the area that was originally family owned is right along the Trinity River down there in Dallas, because you would need to be near a water source when you're establishing a new colony or a new city. So yeah, even just sustaining a community of life, water is essential.
Yep,
Much less
exactly.
the spiritual elements. I mean, my unpacking of water was like, as this all began to sort of germinate and percolate. Um, when you think about all that water is and does throughout Scripture, I mean, you have the waters above. You have the primordial waters, which I love to hear you mention, and maybe you could explain what that is to people for whom that's a new term. But then you have like baptismal waters. You have water and blood that poured out from His side. You have cast your cares upon the waters. You have more mentions of water. I think I heard this accurately than faith or prayer, like things that are very considered essential in the life of a believer and a faith person. Water is mentioned more than that in scripture, and yet there's so much we've never bothered to pay attention to about it.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, well, and we'll get into that, but everything began in water, everything. So, you have that, which for me, whether you're a believer or not, that also translates to the periodic table, because if you look at the very first element, it's hydrogen. So, it's like there, it's just there, and you
Mhm.
just can't ignore it. But it's all through scripture. And I mean, it's a huge part of my destiny. And I love that, like, this is my 40th year, which 40 is a really significant number, because if in the sort of ancient Jewish traditions, 40 is, so you cannot have a synagogue, or you can't have a place to practice the ancient Torah or anything. You can't have any of that. You can't have a community unless you first have a mikveh, or a place to mikveh. And the way that you have a mikveh is by a pool, right? It's a source of water. But the only way that they consider it to actually be a place for mikveh, um, basically mikveh is an immersion in water, is it has to have 40 units of water, basically. So it's at 40 that they consider it to be a full immersion. So 40
Oh,
for me, yeah, it was a very significant year. And I've just really kind of, embraced this year, because it's really, really been revealing to me of a lot of different things. But I always point to the scripture where it's so powerful. It's where Jesus is preparing, and Jerusalem is just crazy, and it's Passover time. And so of course everybody is preparing for Passover, and as Jesus is in his sort of way of being, he wasn't necessarily worried, like, oh, we've got to have a place for the Passover dinner. But every place is, like, basically booked, and everybody's already preparing. But it's so beautiful, because in the scripture, what he says to the disciples, as they're like, okay, so where do you want us to go, like, how, like, where do we prepare this Passover dinner? And of course we know that Passover dinner was powerful. It was the last supper, the last place before Jesus went to the cross. So it was a really huge, huge, huge time and moment of what
yep.
happened. So he says to the disciples in the scripture, he says, um, what you need to do is you need to look for basically the water bearer. The man who is holding the water jug will lead you to the place where we will have the Passover dinner. And so they
Hmm.
find, and scripture says, they find the man with the water jug, just as Jesus had said to them. And that is how that guy leads them to the upper room, to the place where they were going to have that last dinner. And I mean, I just feel that that's key to this time, where it's the water bearer that's going to lead to these moments where it's just pivotal. And it truly is this messiah, the Messiah. This is the era that they talk about. It's the era of the Messiah, but also just kind of the divine nature coming through us. So that's what it kind of represents. Is it's like, this is where we really begin to experience what it means to have the divine nature within us,
Mhm.
and like how that really comes out and shines through us. So that's the era that we're in, and I truly believe that that's what the water bearer represents. And so, yeah, so it's 40 speaks really deeply to me. And I'm excited. I'm excited about what's ahead. This has been a fantastic year.
I love that. So instead of calling it over the hill, we can call it fully immersed.
Exactly.
I mean,
That's
because we're immortal anyway and
perfect.
eternal. So, what is this hill that people are talking about anyway?
Right. No, yeah, it's I would say it's fully immersed, and it's as we continue to talk, you'll understand actually it also means just a an age of wisdom. It's a time where you really wisdom really kind of comes in a whole new way.
And of course, the water bearer also being us, right? Because as rivers of living water are supposed to be flowing from our bellies, we now are those water bearers, right? As well.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And that is why I believe that that's the water. I've always said like the water bearer holds the key. And I mean it in the sense of like, you know, everything may seem to be, there's nothing left there, oh my gosh, are you going to find a room? Are you in that sort of sense, that mindset? Obviously I'm using it just an example, but it's the water bearer that holds the key to open the door to something that, you know people would say that's not going to happen, that doesn't exist, like it really truly is the water bearer who holds the key. And yeah, and that is a time right now.
and I was just looking it up. It's John 7:38. Whoever believes in me, rivers of living water will flow from within them. Come on. It is our time.
It totally is. It's so. And I mean, there's the spiritual and this, everything always mirrors one another. So now you have everything coming with water and the technologies and what we're really understanding, but there's really no separation. So the reason that we're able to have those things is because there's been an inward shift for sure. And so we're really, everything is mirroring each other, and you always have to have like that shift sort of in the spiritual for it to happen in the natural. And so we have really shifted. And so I think where people maybe didn't think of water as anything more than, oh, I need to hydrate myself, I think that this is going to be a time, especially this year and moving forward, where we begin to really see the technology of water. And we are water.
Mhm. And when you say technology of water, you don't mean technologies that are about water. You mean the technology of water itself, right?
The technology of water itself
Yeah.
is,
I'm so
yeah,
curious. I'm so curious if you have any inklings as to like what do we not yet understand about water that is available to us? Has the Lord begun to unpack some of that and you can already see that's where we're headed? I mean, water has memory sort of became, I don't know where that became more well known, but I know culturally, you saw it in the Frozen film, right? Because Olaf even says that, the fact that it could penetrate culture at that level means it's been available, that revelation's been out there somewhere, but there's more.
right. Yeah, I think if you ask me personally, what I would say the shift is for me, it would be coming out from systems of man that have said you have to do it like this and you have to believe this way to experience like the fullness of how how God really created me. And so I think that there's been a movement of Holy Spirit, which has been really important. I think there's been a movement of obviously the Jesus movement, right? But there hasn't quite been a movement when it comes to the creator, right? Like have we ever had an Elohim, creator movement? Have we ever had a
Mhm.
a Yahweh movement? Well, I think that that's what's taking place inward for people, is that they are experiencing the creator. And so the big shift in that is that there's no competition between the three, because in the divine nature the way that they operate is they're not in competition. They're not like, oh, you need to really be experiencing Holy Spirit and then you need to experience Jesus and then, you know there's just been aspects of who we are that we've needed to journey this way. And so it's been how it's been, and it's served a purpose. But I think that we're really coming into experiencing Yahweh, and that has to do with divine nature because it's all three in one. And what does the three in one point to? Well, the one points to what's one on the periodic table? It's hydrogen. What's one in the Aleph Beit or the Hebrew letters? It's Aleph,
Olive.
which is one. And so there's going to be a complete shift in how we operate, I guess, in the divine nature. And that I think is going to shift everything because we are the greatest technology that there is. They could keep creating technologies, but we are the greatest technology. But why? Solely because of water, but also because water is blood. Like water is basically blood. It's connected, it's all entwined. And so, Jesus turning water into wine, there's a whole thing in that miracle that we really are the generations, I believe, that will experience a shift literally in like water in the natural here in the earth is it's a particular formation of what it looks like like the molecular structure of water, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get from water to wine? The molecular structure. Well, that is the divine nature, and that is what Yeshua was pointing to. Because what was the whole thing that happened after that? It was he was bringing the wine, and they were serving it. And what did they say? They said, "Oh my gosh, you didn't like start
You
bringing
saved the
out
best
the
for last."
yeah, you didn't start bringing out the cheap wine because everybody's
Mhm.
already like having a good time. Nobody really cares. Nobody's going to notice." They're like, you brought out the best for last. And that points to us. That points to our generation. That points to this time is this whole shift from the water into wine. So that's why that's why what I see as like this complete shift is us understanding again the wholeness, like the whole picture, I think is important. That's why I think I'm probably in what I'm in and sharing what I'm sharing is to really get people to think of outside of their perspectives, even if you're not faith based, like just really giving them the storyline of creation and saying, this lines up with the periodic table and
Mhm.
like showing them all of it and how amazing God really created things. And so it's not separate. We really aren't separate from creation. We
Yeah.
everything is one. So I think we're starting to understand that.
I I love it. I'm excited. I mean, I'm very fringe in that way. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't need to be kept in the comfortable and familiar. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, what are we doing, God? What's up? What's next? Um, but so that journey with the summer, with this angelic activity and directed me to this company, which is Lumivite, right? And that's the name of the company that God directed me to. And I wasn't looking for this; it was very divinely orchestrated. But I also believe that was a piece of this larger thing that you're saying that God is doing in the earth right now. I mean, the company's name translates to Light of Life, which to me speaks of Christ, right? John, um, in him was the light of life, and his light was the light of men, I think is the way it said. Um, then you have the fact that the whole bottle's design was to recreate the earth environment, to restore water, to make it living water again. And it was all about hydrogen, which I was like, oh my gosh, the age of hydrogen. And I'm even seeing now in news elements of different industries that are putting an emphasis and a focus right now on hydrogen. So it was just an interesting, like, it's only the second time in my life I can say that God went out of his way to get my attention and divinely order my steps in a direction I was not already headed. The The last time was when he directed me to the entertainment industry, and I was like headed in this way, and he was like, "Nope, we're headed over here." Okay, great. As long as you're leading and confirming, I am all on board. Um, but in the conversation and in learning about hydrogen, about molecular hydrogen, there's this phrase that gets thrown around a lot called the God particle. They call hydrogen the God particle. And of course, with the way that you have made the connection with one on the periodic table and the Aleph letter in Hebrew, Aleph being the God letter, the unspoken, the letter that is before any sound, any spoken word that contains an Aleph. I mean, I was like, oh, that's not an accident. And I love the way that you understand the science and you understand the spirit and you understand scripture and you're able to seamlessly and weave them together, because that's the way the Lord works anyway. The tapestry that you allow people to come and see and the table you set for people to feed is so multifaceted and rich, and that's so appreciated. One, thank you for doing the work. But is there more around the whole God particle? I mean, there's even, well, I guess I would say in the science community, they call it the God particle. And I heard somebody say it the other day. She likes hydrogen because it basically does what it wants to do. It enters the body and it has this divine intelligence. They don't really understand why, but it goes to the place of the body where it's needed. It doesn't only follow the digestive tract, but it divinely knows where the weakest points of the system are, and that's where it will focus its energy and attention to help the body heal and repair. So in that way, it has its own divine intelligence, but it also is a molecule that is not going to be contained. It's the smallest. It will escape everything, and so in that way, it also emulates freedom, and in the nature of God in that way cannot be contained. But what for you comes up around all that?
Yeah, well, a lot. Yeah, I mean, if you want, I can share a few of
Yes,
my
go where you want to go. Ready.
there's definitely uh yeah, it's layered. It's so good.
And I
So
will turn on the sound for you. Do you want sound?
sure, yes, go ahead. We'll listen to the sound one time.
It's unmuted on my side. Do you hear it on yours?
Oh, maybe do I need to unmute it on my side maybe?
Probably, yeah.
That'll probably help. Oops, did I do that?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you turn it up any? There it is. We didn't hear much of that. So the volume's louder. You want to play it over?
Yeah. All right. So let's get into it.
By the way,
Yeah,
your ability to create these visuals is so impressive to me.
thank you. Yeah, it's that is one of my favorite things to do. So
It
I
shows you are gifted for this time now in that way.
well, I also, I really did a research on, just visually what it does to, people just on a, subconscious level. Because sometimes people say like, oh, I don't know if I'm quite getting it. And I always say that's okay. If you feel like you're not getting it, just on a level of, okay, I understand this right now. It's totally making sense. I'm like, that's okay. It's still going down into your subconscious level, and those images are doing something, and it's okay. You'll get there. But they're so powerful, and that's why I use images, because sometimes it even just helps people to remember how to even imagine, and just the colors, everything. It really,
Yeah,
really, really does speak to people deeply. So I love doing.
deeply.
Okay, so it's so cool because finally, we're in the era where, even though we've had centuries upon centuries upon centuries of um, scientists, they are finally asking, what is water? Right? They're finally asking right now, what is water? And I think that it's also something that we're asking. I think we're asking spiritually, and I think that scientists are asking like in a very natural, like in the chemistry way. So there's conversations happening right now, and they're connected. So it's so cool because I've been on this journey, and I've realized that in order to explore like the beginning of creation and what is water, you have to go back to the beginning. So I have done that deep dive. I've gone into that journey for a while now, and what I really found was that the Hebrew letters, and this has been a journey for me, the Hebrew letters are all involved with math. So for every Hebrew letter that you have, it also has a gematria to it. So for people who would say, "Oh, it's just a language," it's more than that. And if you are a spiritual person, what I would say is a lot of people are very spiritual. They believe maybe in the elements. For example, they really believe in water and fire and the earth element. They really believe in those, and they really sort of honor them as living. Well, the Hebrew language is living. And I believe that just from a faith based perspective. But I'm just presenting that for everybody today, wherever you're at. But I
Well, and
found,
the way I heard it said, even more than that, that really landed for me was, God, who is living, won't create anything living from that which is dead. So
exactly.
if he's going to
That's really
create,
good.
if he's going to create with the living letters, and if he's going to create when he speaks and using the Hebrew language, you know, they would be living. He's going to create with that which is alive. So I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. And when you really begin to understand the Hebrew language, you really begin to understand that it's not just for a particular people group. And what I always challenge people with that is I say, well, is math just for one particular people group? Is the table of elements just for one particular people group? No. And the Hebrew language is very um, specific in the way that there really is no other language like it. Because, for example, the English alphabet, I mean, an A is an A. There's nothing. I mean, it has a sound, but there's nothing else to it. An
Mhm.
olive is not just an olive. An olive has a gematria to it. It has layers, at least 72 layers of meanings to it. Each letter has at least 72 meanings. And what they do is they open up a picture for you to just step into. So it's just it's living, it's the, what I like to say, it's the emotions of God. So it's, I think that's probably why we've not had our emotional well-being has not been well. And I think
Yeah.
it's because we have really not understood the emotions of God and how he really actually does have emotions.
Yeah.
Healthy, and they represent his essence. So in the deep dive, I really began to see how it's, when you look at the beginning of creation, it's all layered on one another. So you not only have the table of elements in there, but you have the Hebrew living letters, and you've got the math. So that was such an incredible thing to experience. Was, the world created by three things, which I always say is energy, light, and life. So you have those three aspects in there. And so the table of elements, the Hebrew language, and math, and they all tell a part of the story. And so the elements are all the things that the body needs to function. And I think we're learning that a lot more. We're really understanding what we need as far as minerals in our body, um, and of course, salt, water. And we need these things to function and thrive and like live in life. So all of this, I mean, on another level, all of this is not outside of us, but it's also in us. So the elemental table, the Hebrew living beings, and math literally make up our design. And so like why would that be important? Well, because I think everybody is wanting to activate sort of your expression of you, and if you think of yourself as like a song, well, you may be missing some keys to that. And what you need these keys, you need these things to be able to actually like sing. And I mean it by everybody's individual expression and who you are. This is key to that. So let's see, let's go to the next one and see what we got. Okay.
Oh,
So
no.
we were talking about hydrogen, obviously, right?
Yep.
Is I There's so much we could say about hydrogen. So if you look at the story of what it says in Genesis, you see that it says in the beginning, or it's basically Bereshit is the very first Hebrew word. And so you immediately have on the periodic table mirroring that, you have hydrogen. And hydrogen is one. We know that the atomic number for hydrogen is one. But it just shows you that basically in the beginning, everything was immersed in water. Like everything was covered, submerged in water. So if you would say, okay, well, what was the beginning of creation? Well, it was hydrogen. It was a God particle. Why? Because when you look at the New Testament and then you see that it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, it in the beginning was God. And it also says that in Genesis. So in the beginning was hydrogen, but you also can look at that and say, wow, in the beginning, hydrogen is like this essence of who I would say Elohim, because when you look at Genesis, it's the name that is represented there is Elohim. There are other names that come through in scripture, but particularly when it's talking about creation, and that's also, you understand that when you dive deeper, why Elohim. but Elohim is the name that's used. And so Elohim, what does Elohim begin with, though? Elohim in the Hebrew, I love it, you guys. It all ties together. Elohim in the Hebrew, the very first letter of Elohim is Aleph.
Mm.
So, I mean, and the way you have to see things in scripture is like, if it's mentioned, it's a big deal. If it's there, it's because it's like telling you, pay attention. This is so major. So hydrogen is the God particle. And you know, we know that hydrogen is one, Aleph is one. Hydrogen is classified also within the periodic table. Hydrogen is classified like unto itself. So basically what that means is like it doesn't fall into any other categories of metals or non-metals. So hydrogen is it's a very particular element, and we'll kind of see that with this next slide, where we'll go a little bit into this. This is kind of where probably my next teaching will be, and sharing will be a deep dive into this, but you kind of got to be ready for it, because it might go over your head. You don't know a lot of these things, but I'm going to tie it into what we're talking about. But this is basically this is the elements, right? You've got air, water, fire, earth. So these are the classical elements. But then you have what it relates to. And so air relates to oxygen, right? And, so you have the air and the earth, but then you have oxygen. You've got water, but then there's hydrogen that it connects to. Fire, carbon, the earth, nitrogen. So then you have the atomic number, which, oh my gosh, I don't even have time to go into that whole thing. It's so cool. But when you look at the Sephirah, so the Sephirah is basically the attributes of God, his essence, but it's how it relates to our body, basically. So oxygen is related to the crown. So the crown would be like your mind, but it would actually be higher than that. The crown is actually the place of it goes beyond your intelligence. So crown is more of like where you would create from. Crown is your will, and it's like desire or pleasure. Like, so it's from that place that you create. And actually, I think that's really key for people, because I think people don't see themselves create to the full maximum potential that they could, but they have to understand where it comes from. And so you can't create from like your intelligence, for example. You can't create from that place alone. You got to go higher, which has to do with the crown. And I love that it has to do with oxygen, because it's like there's this exchange of like mouth to mouth breath that, I think of like Adam, where he was just breathing his breath directly into his lungs. And then what did he say? Like Adam was like, oh, let me, name all the animals. And so then Adam began to step into that place where he was walking in his divine nature, and that, like, to me is what it looks like. But water obviously is connected to hydrogen. Now, this is why I put this up here, because hydrogen is connected on with the body. It has to do with wisdom. So wisdom is chokmah in Hebrew. And so there is basically the reason that hydrogen, and let me see, I think it's maybe my next slide. So yeah, it is. Okay. So these essences were created to be the light, life within the elements of nature. But nature also is the definition, like it's in the definition also of the divine nature. So elements of nature, air, water, fire, earth. But you also have elements of the divine nature: crown, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. These are all the things that the elements are meant to partner with us, basically. But when it comes to the spirit realm, these are the things that we are supposed to experience within the divine nature of us. Within our actual bodies, we should be crowned. We should, which we know has to do with, being a king and priest, right, here in the earth. We should be crowned. We should carry that wisdom. There should also be understanding to carry out that wisdom. And then, of course, you have knowledge. So you are in the divine nature of what Yahweh has as his light in life. But the cool thing about this, and I'll just say it and then we'll move on, because it's like you could do a deep dive. But the cool thing about these numbers too, so you have 8, 1, 6, and 7. And when you take these numbers and you what they call is like they triangulize them, I think. So basically, like, you put the numbers into a triangle. And if you know about the triangle and in sacred geometry, it's just so fascinating. But the triangular number of these all equal 86, which 86 is that's the gematria of Elohim. So when you look at Elohim and the Hebrew letters of Elohim, it adds up to 86. So this literally triangulared, these numbers add up to 86. And yeah, the triangle is like a whole thing in sacred geometry. And so it's another topic, but it all points back to, like, and that's why I'm like, it all ties together. Like, you can't make this stuff up. Like, and how you always can, like, kind of fact check it for me is always looking at the numbers. Like, if you're like geeking out, you can always look at that and you're just like, whoa, that's just fascinating how it adds up to 86, and that is Elohim.
And what's the word you've been saying? Gematria?
Yes. So the gematria of Elohim, if you take,
how do you spell that word?
So Elohim would be Aleph, Lamed, right? Aleph, Lamed. I think it's Yod, Hey, Mem.
Okay. And then gematria, the word is not geometry, right? It's something different.
Right. Gematria is just like the number value. So,
okay.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing that you have to understand. Like, an A doesn't have a gematria. Our A doesn't have a gematria. Well, but why does an Aleph have a gematria?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's an energy system within it. And so you literally have the number that correlates to it. And so that's like, again, that's why it's like everything you can find ties into one another. But so here we've got just a picture of what I believe is, the era that we're in, or basically it's kind of like everything is not returning to the same, but it's like there's always this movement of what I call a spiral, the spiral of time. And so in a spiral, you do come back around again, but you're higher up. You're just higher up. So in the beginning, and you can go into Proverbs and find so many scriptures about this. In the beginning was Lady Wisdom. So
one of my favorite Proverbs. Yes.
Right. And you can see that in Genesis, but then you could also go to Proverbs where she says specifically, and I say she because the energy of wisdom is feminine. And so it's described as she. But there is all of these scriptures about how she talks about how she was there before the foundations of the world. And so this ties into, wisdom, Chokmah, Aleph, and hydrogen. So Lady Wisdom was there at the beginning. So the God particle, I believe, has to do with wisdom, because wisdom said, I was there before everything. And so basically, to me, wisdom is goes hand in hand and is entangled with hydrogen. And so everything, all of the other elements were created by and with hydrogen, right? So hydrogen was the first one. And then it kind of was like a part unto itself, in the sense that like it's like not in any category like any of the others, but it was through hydrogen that all the other elements, the 92 natural occurring elements, came forth. So same thing with wisdom. Everything came out of wisdom. So well, what is water then? Well, water, it is wisdom. Water is, and that is what's happening. That's what's happening in this era. We are 99% water molecules, in a very physical sense.
Yep.
And so what's happening is, I believe there's just a sovereign sort of, I see it as sort of how I've seen it in just my intimate prayer time, meditation time, is that there sort of was a sealed, a sealed up scroll, or a sealed up decree, or however you want to say it, for this time period, for these generations. And what I feel was definitely during the reset, like 2020, the shutdown, I really believe we completely shifted and we moved into the era that we're in.
Yep.
Personally, who I am, I always look at Israel, because even if people don't correlate events, what happens in Israel matters, and it's how you can kind of look at where we are. So at that point, and some things that have happened, I was like, oh, we are completely shifted into this new age. Like, we're in this new era. We are absolutely in this. And so what happened was, something that was sealed it broke open, because this is the time for it. And so I believe that there's like this sovereign release of the wisdom. Again, like in Genesis, it says that the ruach like hovered over the waters, and I believe there's like hovering happening again to us. And what's happening is, we're remembering that everything came out of wisdom. And the reason that that's so important is because we have forgotten who we are. And so wisdom is so much more, I think, than we can tell you what to do. Wisdom is the God particle. Wisdom is what everything in creation responds to. So there's this sovereign move within us that, like, literally, like this hand, it's like we carry the divine nature within us. So there's this touch, there's this real reality to it, of actual response from all of creation. And I believe that the living waters will begin to flow again from us. And there's absolutely a lot of healing that needs to take place within us, but also within creation, within the world. And so the water bear holds the key, right? Like I said, and that's where I believe that we are. And like I said, I think it's a sovereign, it's a sovereign thing that God is doing. And I believe that it's also from a place of oh, here's Elohim. Yeah, I've got it there in the Hebrew too, so you can see Aleph,
But yeah,
Lamed,
and even in the body of Christ, the name Elohim is not been used very much. So it's really bringing us back to that as well. And the wisdom, the wisdom of Solomon, right? God said, because you asked me for wisdom, I will give you everything else. And I don't think that was just a reward. I think it was also that, like, there's a relationship there that from wisdom does flow everything else.
Right.
And it said, above all else, get wisdom. Like, trade whatever you need to get wisdom, basically. Like, it's the most precious thing to get.
Exactly. I mean, I think that there's also just ways of where we just naturally gravitate towards, at least in these generations too, we gravitate towards people who seem to have all the answers, or it's like this is the information age, right? And you have it right at your
Mhm.
fingertips, so to speak. But I think that that's why there's like this activation of the God particle. Like there's this activation of wisdom because um, stuff really isn't going to solve anything. I mean, honestly, and I ever forget who I heard say this, but I was like, that's actually really really wise. Um, it was somebody just talking on a podcast about how even if in the poor countries, like I'm not saying that it's not good to try to get food to people who don't have food, all that stuff. But what they were basically saying was like, if you just focus on like getting people, food or it's like stuff, or like, oh, they need money, right? They need money so that way they can buy food, or they need money so they can buy things.
Mhm.
Which obviously basic necessities we want for every person. But but his message was more just pointing to the fact that like that's really not the answer though if you look at the root, because every person carries the wisdom innately within them. So what is it that they are not understanding about, even where they've been born, even where their situation, like of the God particle, that like everything out of creation has been created by it. So what do you not have? What do you not have access to? And I don't mean it in a way of like ego, because that doesn't work. There's a downfall that happens from that. But from a place of, again, like understanding the divine nature and celebrating the union. I think that really is going to change everything, where um you know, it's more than just giving people information. It's more than solving, their problem for the moment. But really, the way that water works, the other thing about that is that all you need sometimes is one person to stand in a group of people and vibrate and calibrate their selves, and basically that person, the level of wholeness, they can bring the entire group up to that place. Why? Because mother water works that way.
Mhm.
Mother water is living, and so anything that isn't will remember, and it will be living. And so that's another aspect to who we are and why we're in the era of water, and why we're understanding how powerful this is.
Yeah, and if you think about, the nature of the information age, and like you said, it's fast, it's short information bites, it's data, it's transient, and dare I say shallow. But wisdom is not that, and the waters, deep waters, are not that. They are the antithesis of that. And there is that, exactly, the calming, the wholeness, the slowing that comes from that, almost as an antidote to what our culture has raced so far toward. Um, and it's
Yeah,
needed. I
and
mean, you see it in our generations.
yeah. Well, and I know that there's a big there's a message out there a lot about, immortality and everything. And so um I think that what I really have learned about water and immersion is that there's something really beautiful about for me, I've really been on a journey with mikvah and learning what it is, and just to share with anybody listening who doesn't know me, I am not in Judaism, but I really embrace in this new era the ancient paths, and that's all I want. I don't long to be under any system anymore. So, grew up in the church. I was, Christian, Pentecostal, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of meetings, and I'm really grateful for that journey, and I honor it. But I've also been so thankful to come out from any system of man, and now I'm just like, I just want the ancient ways of Yahweh,
Yep.
and that's the path that I've been on. And so when I experienced my first mikvah, and I experienced more mikvahs. I actually did some mikvahs in Israel, and that was incredible. One of our mikvahs, we did it. We were just going. We were excited. So we mikvahed in our clothes, like just we were at Ayin Gedi, and so basically that's the waterfalls where David hid from Saul, and you feel something there. I'm telling you, like it just carries something there. And I was like, I know I'm in my clothes, but I don't care. I'm getting in that water. And so I just got in that water, and it was amazing. It was incredible. Um, but that journey has been it has taught me so much. And what I've realized about, I think even the connection between baptism, because if you really study, Jesus didn't do a baptism, but he did do a mikvah. But it's not necessarily to say like there isn't this experience with Holy Spirit, but what it looks like is like you're literally looking at Genesis again. And so there's this, and I love mikvah because nobody puts you under. You go under yourself,
Okay.
and you go under 3 times, and each time you go under, you make a vow, and it's so beautiful. And so you go down and you immerse, and there's this vow that you say, and usually the first one is just you're rededicating your temple. You're rededicating your temple, and you come back up, and the second one is having to do with your destiny, your purpose, and you're vowing to fulfill whatever it is that the Father has for you. You're vowing to fulfill that, and then you go back down under. And then the third one is just this personal request. Like, you can say it out loud or you can just hold it in your heart, but it's just this personal request between you and the Lord. And then you go back down. And I love the third one because you go back down and you just stay under until you feel like you got to come up. But it's like there's something that happens, and there's this burn, right? Because you're a swimmer, because there's this point where you're like, okay, I need to get oxygen, right? But there's a burning that happens. And what I found is like, that's basically how salt is created. Is water is shined on. So you have the fire coming, the sun shining on the water, and then it crystallizes and it becomes salt. And so it's like this merging, this bond. It's a bond, chemical bond that happens between fire and water. And you would think that they are opposite because fire evaporates water, right? And then water extinguishes fire. But in that, it's like there's this there's this covenant that happens. And you come up, and what I've seen is like it's literally it's going back down into those primordial waters. And so, are we immortal? Absolutely. Because in that way, what water does is you went down, and the old, whatever happens of like whatever disease, decay, whatever, it's gone. And then you come back up and you're a new creation. And like, obviously I'm still 40. But it's like everything else is. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to live forever because I go down in those waters. And the other part of that is that I let go. I let go of everything. And I don't know what's going to happen when I come up, in the sense that, is life going to be how it was before? I let go of that. I let go of of trying to hold on to it or whatever it is. And so I really believe that water is that immortal place. It
Yep.
really is. So I'm so excited about what's happening in this time, obviously.
Well, I agree, and I love this term, the primordial waters, and those would be what you're referring to in Genesis, right? Where this the Holy Spirit hovered, where Ruach hovered over the deep. Those deep waters would be the primordial waters you're referring to.
Right, exactly. Primordial waters. And I love that term because the other the other thing I try to get people to think about is like, okay, we've got water as we know it, right? But what about water? What about the primordial waters? What about waters back before even the world was created? Because,
Right.
the other thing I love again about Hebrew is like it takes you onto a deep dive. It gives you a picture. So the word for heavens is Hashemayim. Well, Hashemayim, it's Hashamayim, and so Mayim is water. So literally, what you have is what is the heavens? Well, the heavens are hydrogen. Like literally, the heavens are the God particle. He's just all there, right? But it's also water. It's water because of what it's saying to you in the Hebrew. It's Hashemayim, so it's literally telling you, oh, heaven, it's water. So there, all the primordial waters were completely, everything was immersed in it until we know then he separated it. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are the primordial waters.
I know, I love it. They got separated, and I mean, because yeah, you're exactly right. They were the waters before anything else had transpired. So all of the creative potential of everything that was to come forward existed there.
Exactly. And that's what water is supposed to be. Water is supposed to be potential, because that's where you create. So it carries potential, and so you are in that, and it's out of that place that things flow, and so even like you can even look at that. For example, if you think about food, your mouth begins to salivate,
Oh my gosh, I
and
love when you went into this on one of your recent ones. Yeah, this got me. I was like, yes, the
yeah,
whole flowing.
and
Go there.
right.
It's so good. I loved it.
It's and I always say, like, when you look at the earth is always mirroring what's above. So you have the upper waters and the lower waters. So what you have down here in the earth is the earthly blueprint. So I always try to help people, like when I say explain certain things, I'm like, it's not the earthly way. There's a heavenly or an upper blueprint. So in Bereshit, the feminine and the masculine waters began to flow. And so in the earth realm, when you are longing to be together in a union between a woman and a man, for example, there's a desire. And so in our design, and it's meant to be how it's supposed to be, there's waters that flow. So in the earth realm, that's what happens. And so there's a blueprint from above where that happens as well. And so the masculine and the feminine waters are meant to be one. And if anything, within us, within every person, you have the masculine and the feminine. And so it's not just like men and women. It's actually who we are, because everybody has, everybody has masculine and feminine in them. It's
Yep.
not like, it's not again, you have to think of it as a blueprint from above
Yep.
rather than below. But yeah, that's what was happening in Bereshit, because our idea of God is probably that, I don't know, he's like fire and brimstone or whatever, but he was truly excited. He was creating from this potential of, oh my gosh, I just want to be together. Like, I want to experience this creation together. And so, even though he could have been the only creator, right? Which is what you see. That's why I love the periodic table. And there's a whole nother level to this, which I haven't gotten into, but I'm like, okay, we're getting there. And I know people will be able to go into this, but like when you look at the noble gases, for example, the noble gases are six inert gases. And basically, what the six inert gases do is they don't react with any other elements. It's kind of funny, but they don't they don't react with any other elements. All the other elements, foreign compounds and things like that. These six inert elements are called noble gases, and so it's very interesting because there are 92 elements in the natural occurring elements. And so there's 86, and then you have those six. So what I've come to realize is that the 86 is Elohim,
Okay.
and then you have the six, which is man.
Man.
Six represents man.
Yep.
And so what we have to have is we have to activate the God particle. We have to activate the 86. But we have this sort of wrestle with the six because we are like, we don't want to work together.
Yeah, they want to stay unto themselves.
Exactly. But what we can see though through that is that, well, but both exist in nature and it's meant to be there for reasons, but you have to have all of it. So you have to be able to, for some people, maybe it's like they really like that six. Maybe some people are like, more over here with the 86. But you really do have to have the balance, and you have to, I believe that the noble six is probably for most of us where we are as kings and priests. And I mean it in the sense that you have to be okay. Like you have to be able to walk and understand who you are. So I think that sometimes we gravitate and we want to, sort of be with other people because we don't want to face ourselves. We don't know how to actually be our own king and priest. So that's important. The six is very important, which I believe is why it represents man. And I think he gives us the choice. Like he's like, wow, I've given you the ability to be noble and be this incredible reaction, like unto ourselves, creating. I mean, the six inert gases are incredible. It's like, but will you choose? Will you choose to be like who I was, though, as Elohim? Because Elohim in Genesis chose to bring us into it. He chose to partner with us. And he was like, I want to be together with you in this. And he didn't have to. So I haven't gone into the noble gases quite yet, but I mean, it's an incredible deep dive when you really start to understand what it represents and what it means to us. And and then just like I said, how it connects to the living letters, and the gematria is like just completely perfectly accurate. You're just like, I mean, again, you can't make this stuff up. And I think that for some people, maybe it'll help them settle a little bit where they are with their beliefs and, their faith. Because I don't think that God is asking you to join a religion. If anything, I think he doesn't want you to join a religion at all. I think what he wants is for you to just experience him and who he is through creation, and like just his essence, his his true way. And I think that that's the beautiful invitation we have in this era, is like, you don't need a man telling you, you don't need, to go to a church, quote unquote. But I think that there's a desire within us to walk this ancient path. And so I think through that, we're finding community. And community, I always tell people, I don't tell people like they have to go join a church because I'm not actually part of a church. I haven't been in a long time, but I'm in community and I
Yep.
have people that known me for a long time. And so I always tell people, but community is important. And he'll guide you there. He'll guide you to like-minded people. Um, yeah, and so it's a really it's a beautiful time.
It is, and I agree. I mean, the first thing God said wasn't good was for man to be alone. So, community, um,
Exactly.
it's essential. And this whole notion that, like, it takes a village. There's a reason that phrase is true because like we're never supposed to be have been doing it alone, and people are suffering because of the isolation and then trying to do it all themselves. So, community makes the sharing of of the gifts that God gave you, so that you can bring those and offer those to somebody who needs what you have, and you can benefit from the gifts that God gave them. I mean, it just lightens your load and so much about that. But the I love also that what you've unpacked is the cosmic architecture, the cosmic narrative that will tie into some knowings that people have had. There's some deep wooings and deep calling out to deep, and some very ceremonial and honoring behaviors that people have around water and nature and creation and all these things that we're intimately connected to and for a reason. But you've set out the cosmic interplay and the architecture. I love like the threefolded of like the numerical value with the element, with the living letter. I mean, they create their own pyramid triangle, all relating to one another, the three in one. Um, it's yeah, it just it evokes an awe and a wonder for me, which I think is so needed,
Mhm.
especially for anyone who grew up with any sort of established religion experience. It can feel stale. And so the awe and the wonder that I love, I see in a lot of the community that I'm connected to, and that people who are coming to this message about water and even technologies about water and the technology of water, when they discover the beauty of how God's created things in nature, there is an awe and a wonder and an honor and appreciation that is a posture I think we're always benefiting from. It creates a posture of worship and adoration. And, I love that. But for me, it just sets me in a place to be, again, just so in awe of the, the incredible intelligence in God's design, um, because he can do all of this and yet be so intimately personal. And, I,
Exactly.
mm, it just makes me grateful.
Yeah, and I think that that's why it's been so great to share this is, I've I've always kind of, you know, asked the Lord, like, is this needed to share, like, with people out there, and is it too much, too soon? But this was something that I felt he was saying, was to really share his intimate nature. Um, because I know that there are a lot of teachings and things out there, especially within the mystical movement, where it's teaching you and sharing about all kinds of things, which is awesome. I'm not saying that that's not needed, but I guess what I've learned in especially my immersives, which is why I started doing the immersives. Well, I guess that wasn't the reason. It's just that I realized people were connected into that by the Father, and I was like, okay. Um, it was meeting people where they needed to be met, and what I realized was that people really just long to like experience what is real. And um, there's so many questions I think that they have, especially in this transitional time where a lot of people are like, okay, I'm not maybe in a church, but I'm like part of a community. Like, how do I walk this out? And also I think just what do I believe? What do I really believe? Um, and so the immersives have really met them um, where they needed to be met. And so it's so intimate, it's so personal,
Mhm.
it's very deep. And I have seen that through the teachings that I've done, um, that it really just it communicates that Yahweh is intimate. He's personal. He's not this God that's just like, you know, out in the sky, but he really is a part of every single molecular um, level of you, like all of basically his divine nature, he gave it to us. Like this, we really do carry. We aren't the source. I think maybe there's some teachings out there where I will say, I will say for myself and my belief, I am not the source in that I replace him because I wouldn't be who I am without the source. He's the source. He is the source of all of it. Like we said, hydrogen. You know, can anything else be functioning? No, because hydrogen is sort of that first foundation. Elohim is that first foundation. And so everything comes from that place. But what I realized was that, he really is intimate and he is so personal. And that everything that he created, it all was about not, that's the other thing is it's like, man, he's so amazing. He literally in the water, we talked about how it's potential. He literally said, like, look, in the water, in the energy, in the light systems of all of this, I'm going to just place the potential, but I'm going to allow for them to choose what they do with that potential. He didn't say, like, he said, like, it's good. He said it's good, but that doesn't mean that he was like, okay, there's no potential for anything to, be taken and used in a, you know, bad way or an evil way or whatever however you want to say it. He didn't remove that.
Yep.
He just allowed for the potential. And the way I describe it to people is like it's a polarity. So you have like the upper and the lower waters. And a lot of times people haven't experienced what I would call like a mikvah or a immersion in the upper waters. So they only know how to sort of operate from the lower waters. And so the lower waters alone, you are then sort of dealing with all of the earthly frequencies and things that manifest from that. And so in the upper waters, that's where the kingly, priestly order comes from of Yahweh. That's how you operate as a king and priest unto Yahweh. The lower, you can be a king and priest unto yourself. And he
Mhm.
created that potential.
Yep.
He didn't say, I'm gonna take that from you. I'm not gonna allow you to do that. He was like, if that's what you choose, then that's what you choose. And so, I mean, I see it all the time. I can recognize the frequency of somebody operating as a king and a priest in the earth. But doing some pretty crazy stuff. But that's what the potential is. And I just I look at that and I'm just like, wow, he wanted us to choose. He really wanted it to be our choice. And he wasn't like, I'm gonna just cause you to be enamored like by my glory and my because look, Yahweh showing up in all of his glory and all of his frequency. I
Mhm.
mean, how do you like Sinai all over again? Like, because how do you encounter that and then not just like out of being freaked out? I mean, I wouldn't be, but I'm a weirdo in that way. I'd be like Moshe. I'd be up the mountain like yes. But a bunch of people just freaked out like, okay, like like, I'm so freaked out, I'm going to give you my allegiance, or I'm going to, I'm going to do what you say because I'm just so freaked out. But they're also going to build, golden calf. But I'm just saying, like, what would the response really be? It wouldn't be genuine. And that's what this journey is he's like, I don't know, I don't only want you to understand who I am, but he's like, I want you to understand who you are. And that has just been, it's just been wrecking me because, I think that it's amazing to be spiritual. It's amazing to be able to be in tune with the elements. And I think Christians have not been. I think Christians have really, we have really dropped that ball, so to speak, in that area. Like, we haven't really been in tune with the elements, the earth. We haven't understood any
No.
of that. So I think that it's really great that there have been aspects of groups of people that really get that. But if I could encourage any of those people, it would be to really go into a journey with the source of those elements, and the source as creator, and his name is Elohim. And what's in a name? Well, a name matters because Elohim specifically, like I said, it the gematria of it is 86. And that the Hebrew name for nature is also 86.
What?
So, yes, yes. So, if you are a spiritual person that loves the elements, that loves nature, I would say bring it together and experience Elohim, because then you're going to experience nature from the upper waters coming down, and that's a whole new experience. And then once you're able to do that and just calibrate from that place, calibrate your waters, experience true shalom, true peace, because peace in the earth is temporal. So a lot of times people who are spiritual, but they don't have an actual real experience and connection with God.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean God as Elohim, not just a outward expression of universe. Again, that is something that I get it and I understand it, because that is a real thing. Universe is a real thing. That is Yahweh. Like, it is. But Elohim from the upper waters is a whole nother experience, because then you understand true peace and shalom, and you understand how to govern your waters. Then you can really make an impact in the earth realm. And then the two become one. The upper and the lower waters just become one, and then you're that triangle, right? That's coming down, the triangle that's going up, and you are literally a governing system of your own. And that's just I don't want to put out too many, just a sacred little mystery right there for you, but um it really is the most incredible thing. And I grew up in the church, and oh my gosh, I'm, like I said, I'm thankful for all of that, but I've never
Absolutely.
felt so alive as I have the past 7 years. Like, oh my gosh, just, it's
Well,
amazing.
the church doesn't know him that way. As you said, the church doesn't know Elohim. We weren't introduced, so
Right.
the one of my favorite teachers also talks about, like, a name evokes the nature, identity, character, essence, um, mandate, power. Like, there's so much that's in a name, and so the various names of God give us an invitation to experience what a different name won't.
Exactly.
So when Elohim has not been imparted and taught and understood, or we have not had that connection. And yet, as you rightly said, some people have had a knowing, they felt a connection for what Elohim is and is about, but not had an introduction. And so, as you said, when you marry the two, um, that's a whole new awakening. And I love that the 86 and the 6 also, to me, was like, the fullness of the natural world, the fullness of the created world is all that God is and the nature of man. You know, God and man, you know, occupying the physical realm, the physical space, even though we are more than this. In this plane, in this realm where these elements occupy and operate, it is all that God is and man together.
Exactly. That's so good. That's I mean, I always, ask people like, what do you think about how, you know, he has Hashemayim, right? He has heaven. Well, so then what's the purpose of earth? Because it's not like earth was a product of the fall. Like it's not like he was like, oh no, Adam and Eve, and okay, great, I'm going to create the earth for them to go to now. It wasn't that way. So it's like, so what was his ultimate desire? Well, his ultimate desire, like you're saying, is the 86 and the 6. And even further, I mean, in New Testament, well, in Old Testament too, but there's the whole talk in the scripture about the new heaven and the new earth. And I've always been like, well, he already created heaven and earth. And I'm like, I'm supposed to become the 86 and the 6. Well, perhaps that's because I have a heaven and an earth to create, um, just like Elohim, because I mean, he created me and that's what he's done. And so I've always just been like, look, I don't take myself out from that. Like I go, maybe it's us that will create the new heaven and the earth with him, but maybe it's us, and I truly believe that no matter what, I believe that we are creating the new heaven and the new earth within us, though. I believe that that's what's happening right now within us. And so that's that sort of merging of the two. That's why I always say, like, it's great to go up and into those upper waters. You really do need to begin there, because the frequencies are different and it will calibrate you. And then once you can really understand that, because again, everything is frequency, everything is energy, everything is vibration. So once you go up into those upper waters and you spend time, you will literally be retuned. So then when you are in the earth, and kind of how I describe it is like, you just understand that chaos is simply matter that has forgotten its original frequency. So, for example,
Mhm.
you were saying about the name. I am big on names, which actually in this Zoom call, I've actually been saying Jesus, but for me personally, I say Yeshua. Now,
Mhm.
what I will say about that is you have to know him as Yeshua. So I'm always like, but let it be authentic, because um I knew that's all I knew for so long was Jesus. So even when I realized, like, oh well, he would actually probably, his mother would have called him Yeshua, like he would have been Yeshua. He, like, Jesus
Yes.
literally isn't
They didn't have a
even
J in that culture.
gay. I mean, like some of that makes me really like, like, like why did they do, because they didn't change Satan. Anyways, just saying. Side note.
Just
Um,
saying.
just saying, they did not change Satan. But they changed that, and it's like there's a particular relationship though that you come into when you really experience Yeshua, because to me, I think what my journey was like, wow, I really knew Jesus sort of, I would say really honestly, from an American Christian westernized perspective and mindset. And that was kind of, like, I don't know, even I live in California, so I think my Jesus was even sort of like, like you could probably find him somewhere on the beach and be like, hey, Jesus looked like this, like this blonde surfer guy. I mean,
Yeah.
that literally was like my image for a while. But it's interesting because my journey was really like, after especially coming into the Hebrew letters, was like, I just want to be authentic though. So it's not like I started calling him Yeshua right away. I didn't. I was like, I just wanted to be authentic. So it was when I really knew him as that I was like, okay, yeah, like I'm gonna call him Yeshua because now like that's who I know him as. So I always encourage people like don't jump on a bandwagon, don't
Sure.
start condemning yourself and saying, oh, I say this. No, no, no.
Don't make a new
Let
rule for yourself.
Exactly. Let it be authentic. And same thing with like Yahweh and Adonai and Elohim. Um, maybe you say God. Like it's okay. You like there's an authentic journey to take. And all it takes is your heart saying, yeah, deep is calling out to deep. I want to go deeper. And then he will meet you in that. And you will. You really will go deeper. But the name thing is a huge thing for me because chaos is basically, everything through, like we just talked about, through the elemental table, through the Hebrew letters and the math, everything was framed and given an original frequency and vibration, everything. There's nothing that wasn't given that.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, what happens is things go into chaos because it's forgotten its original frequency and vibration and calibration. So can we do that from the earth realm if that earth realm's all that we know? No, that's why people in the earth realms, like coming from that place, they're still experiencing tons of chaos because no matter how spiritual you are and how many elements you feel you're one with, that's not the original place where it was named. So you have to go up into the upper waters.
Yeah.
Then you can be retuned. And then what happens is then you hear things differently. So like for me, I'm like, I don't say like, oh, don't listen to this or don't look at that or don't. But I'm always like, oh, okay, I can identify, okay, that is a very low vibration and I can identify what's a very high vibration. And so in the earth realm, though, if that's all you know, you probably think that the low vibrations are actually really high. That's why people are like, oh my gosh, this song is so amazing. And, sometimes I'm like, oh, it's making me cringe, like it's making my ears. And it's not that I don't listen. I dance. I like to have a good time. It's not that I'm not like, but I totally now
Feel the feeling on it.
yeah, I can totally hear the lower vibrations versus those high frequencies. So it's just a different, it's just a different calibration.
Yep.
And I always tell people like go from the upper and then you can then begin to govern and pull the upper and the lower together. And then it's a whole different thing.
Well, the
But
upper
yeah,
is the tuning fork. The upper is the original. You can't tune an instrument without a tuning fork to know what to tune to. And so if
exactly.
you're in the earth realm, you can't raise that earth realm to a heavenly vibration. You have to start here and it has to rise.
Exactly. And there's just things in the earth realm that there's agreements. And so, I think that's why sometimes Christians have sort of come across other, people sort of, um, they're practicing as well, just maybe not. Not the same way. But the reason I think that sometimes like Christians have been like, I don't know how to, you know, help this situation, or maybe there's like a storm, a major storm, or maybe there's bloodshed happening a lot, like a lot of deaths or a lot of things, well, there's agreements for the earth realm that are established, and so if you have a kingly priestly order in the earth unto yourself, pledging yourself on altars that are not pure, well, there's power in that. So that's why for a Christian, if you do not know and you're just trying to like fight that same energy, it doesn't work. You can't, they actually have agreements again in the earth. But that's the thing. They're tied to the earth. So you have to go higher, and then you really, what you end up realizing is you're not dealing with them anyways. You're not like trying to come against them anyways. But then you can maybe, handle a storm, or maybe a situation in your city, or something's going on where you're like, wow, this is really kind of crazy. And um, like I remember there was a time where there was a lot of shootings.
Mhm.
And so when stuff like that starts to happen, there are people operating in the earth realm from from not good altars. So what the kings and the priests have to do is come from the upper waters, or if you've already calibrated the upper and the lower, then you come from your throne of rest, and you really you just do whatever the Father is showing you to do. But it really isn't, again, against people. Like, we're not coming up against people, but
Mhm.
and plus, it's like that's a total different time when the kings and priests um of the order of Yahweh, or I say the order of Melchizedek, come up against other people. We will, but not yet. We still have a lot of we still have some things to journey through. But yeah, so I think that the way that you go about that, like you were saying, is because um we are water, and we basically are an instrument, and so you're retuned to the original.
Yep. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know I spent a lot of years on worship teams, and in worship there was such a recalibration that happened because you're connected there, and it made it easier when I entered the entertainment industry and was in environments that were very earthly and very lower vibration. It made it easier to exist, to stay connected above. I don't mean to say to live above, but I mean, or in any sort of arrogant way, but like it
Right.
also made it easier to know when other people didn't know anything other than that, because they don't always. And it's easier to sort of let things wash off of you when there's something else that you know, but when that's all that it's hard to imagine what's on the other side of what you don't know. And so I was always grateful for my deep experience and immersion in worship for so many years, that saturation really as a precursor to being in very worldly, earthly spaces.
Right. Exactly. That's you said it really well. Um, it's just that way you can, you identify, and then it's because I always tell people, like, it doesn't matter where you are. I mean, wherever you are, you're water. So based on your agreements, again, it's based on your agreements, you will be retuned to those things. Again, unless, like you're saying, if you have gone and you have spent time and you have been retuned by the upper, the original, well, the lower cannot retune you unless you want it to, unless you agree to that, and make that agreement again. But that's why it's so important, and I don't think a lot of people know that. And again, you're subject to that. You're subject to the earth if that is all you have known, have practiced, Um, and so it's how we can be in places, really just wherever the Lord tells us to go, we can be there. And we don't have to be afraid. We don't have to run. Oh my gosh, I think people who feel that way probably aren't ready for that, and they probably shouldn't. But yeah, it really does make that difference.
Enormous, huge. And I can always and because I know that, I can always also tell when I haven't spent enough time there, because you do begin to discern the difference. You're like, oh, okay, yep, I'm feeling it, literally the lack of time spent there. It's so it's
Yeah,
always it's
well,
always nice to have that knowing, oh, there's better available to me.
exactly, because it's never, it's eternal. So it's not like, even if you are calibrated and you're matured in that, so to speak, it doesn't mean that that's it. You always, I feel like there's kind of like a Selah, and then you go back into times where you kind of get immersed again. Um, and I always say, like, the immersion is what prepares you for when you're out. When you're out of those waters, like, I mean, and you're always in the waters, but the immersion is what prepares you to go and, be wherever it is that you're supposed to be. Um, you can't be in those places and then all of a sudden go, oh, let me prepare, like that's not how it works.
Mhm.
There's a preparation period before. And, yeah, and
Which harkens back to your mikvah and the immersion and the 40 years and the preparation for, full circle there.
exactly. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, to be in that and to be prepared. And, I the thing about Yahweh is that, he doesn't like, he's not like, oh, you have to do it like this. And if you don't do it like this, then I'm just gonna strike you down. He's not like that. But what I love about him is, I always share with people that he loves ceremony, though. Yahweh celebrates ceremony. I mean, you see it all through scripture. And it really was his idea. It was his original idea. And so, like Bereshit and Genesis and all of that, it's this beautiful ceremony.
Mm.
And that is sacred to him. He's not interested in you like getting it right and doing it exactly, whatever. But he loves and absolutely holds sacred ceremony. And that's always kind of how I've lived my life, is kind of, you know, um, just getting excited about what season I'm going into, and the ceremony of, like, that being prepared, or, um, just whatever it looks like, of how he's kind of initiating or commencing it. It's like, oh, I love that. And he just loves to do that. And I mean, you look at really big life events and it's there. I mean, marriage, or,
Graduations,
birthdays. Yeah, exactly.
birthdays.
Graduations. There's a ceremony that
Mhm.
happens, and it really does matter. It's sacred, and it's an actual, sort of, like, there's a particular vibration that happens where you, I always see it as like there's like a breaking of, the old wineskin, and then it's like you are then coming into the new wineskin, so that way you can, carry that new wine. And we all know that you can't have the new wine if you have an old wineskin. It'll burst.
Yep.
So there's like this ceremony of that happens, and you kind of like, get that sort of upgrade, like you kind of, mature. And so it's always so beautiful. I love seeing that in people's lives, and I always tell them, like, hey, no matter what you've experienced in your life and what was celebrated or what wasn't celebrated, God celebrates you, and he loves ceremony. And so
Mm.
whatever you like to do, like, whatever you like, that's what he likes. Like, he loves to do things that like just makes you really shine and smile, and, and, yeah, he loves that. I mean, so, birthdays, like, and I know people have a lot of traumas and things around their birthdays and stuff like that, but I'm always like, oh, you gotta do something and celebrate your life, because God absolutely does, and he
Yeah.
loves doing that stuff. So yeah,
I know. I one of my things I pretty regularly wish and pray over people for their birthdays is like I pray that you feel the celebration of heaven and of earth, because heaven is absolutely celebrating us,
yeah.
and how rich are our lives if we can actually experience how much God celebrates us and loves us.
Oh yeah. I mean, it it that's I think that, again, like, that's this ancient path has, you know, just brought me, I think, more of a face to face, than ever before. And I've just, I've realized that in that, it's like I can see myself so much more. And I'm like, wow, I don't know. I've embraced myself. I've celebrated myself. I've found myself again.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and so it's like the deeper you gaze into his face, like the deeper you find him, but also the deeper you find you, but the authentic you, like the real you that you're like, I don't know what I like, or I don't know, who I am anymore. All those questions, they just get answered. And it's so beautiful. And yeah, so this is
I agree.
an
I
amazing conversation. Oh my gosh. Wow.
We do like the deep waters. We did say that. We gave them fair warning.
Yes.
Um, but like that's also, I mean, you said it earlier. I think somebody said it about you, but I think I told you this. I look very mainstream, but I'm very fringe. Um, because that's just this was the package he put me in, but the waters run to the deep and to the fringe. And I mean, I was in a Bible Belt city, and I managed to find like the one church in town that I didn't know this. I just loved being there and found great community and felt led there, and it was amazing for my 4 years of college. And I apparently the reputation around town was like this was the fringe church, and I was like, well, of course it was.
Of
I didn't
course.
know that. I just knew I was where I wanted to be and around people who vibed the way that I do. So I never thought of the second thing of it, but that's kind of how things roll for me.
Yeah, well, it's some of us get to be a little bit more hidden in it. But I don't know. I'm not sure where I fall on that. I sometimes I think I'm more and more like out there because I don't know. I guess I don't think about it anymore too much. But well, and I say that because the other day I was like, oh, a friend of mine gave me this sweater, and it was like just like all this Hebrew, and like it was just like giant on my sweater. And I was like walking around, and going to the market and going places. And I was like, huh, people are really kind of giving like looking like staring at me. And I was like, that's kind of weird. I was like, oh, all right. And I didn't think about it. But then I was like, wait, it's probably my sweater. They were like, "Ooh, okay, like and I think that they really were looking at my sweater like what does that say? And it's a frequency. So I think it was like, but I was like, wow, I really just kind of was being who I was and not caring. And didn't even think about the fact that I was wearing that, so openly, Um, but I think that I don't know, I've always been good with that. I've always been okay with um I mean, I'm not like a troublemaker, but I got kicked out of a lot of churches, let's say that. And not because I was like trying to, but I just, I was always the one asking the questions like, wait, but if like, wait,
Yeah.
and we would just be like, Kara, can you not ask questions, Or like you were saying, I led worship for so long in those church years. And I'll never forget this pastor once asked me, he's like, Kara, you sing really pretty. Can you just do that and not do the extra stuff that you do? And I was like, the extra, And he was like, yeah, like, all of the extra, like, Holy Spirit stuff. And I was like, wow, that's really, that's really direct. But he was serious. Like he
Yeah,
wanted me to sing
I
really
know.
pretty. He wanted me to do just like what the songs were, you know, and he was
Yep.
like, but don't do any of the extra in between.
Mhm.
And yeah, I challenged him a few times after that, and then I just, I honored him and I said, I gotta go.
Mhm.
This definitely isn't, I'm not. You need to find a worship leader who is what you need, and that's just not me. And so I definitely, I I have some stories, but I was,
You've been around for a while, everybody's got stories. Some just
yeah,
happen to have left some people very bitter, wounded, and worse for wear. But I like you, I'm like, I know where I came from, and I'm grateful for what it served for me in that time.
absolutely. Oh yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time it's not I'm not angry. You know, I'm thankful. I'm grateful. I I really, really experienced so many things that I just wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't. And I also really understand where people are within the church who
Yep.
are kind of trying to make that transition, or they're just, they really resonate with what I'm sharing, but they're like, nobody's teaching that, in my church. And I'm like, it's okay, just be wherever it is that God has you to be. You don't have to jump on ships, go jump somewhere, I'm always like very encouraging to people of this was 7 years now of a journey. And so it's not like I just immediately, one day was like, okay, and now I'm in the, table of elements and the Hebrew letters. And now, not at all. If anything, there was a really, really significant year. And I have videos, where I share about that. And I literally went on a sound fast for a year when I first
Whoa.
encountered when I first encountered the living letters. I went on a sound fast for a year. And so I didn't listen to anything. I didn't watch anything. And it was just something that really, like, the Lord invited me into. He wasn't like, you have to do this. He was just like, if you want to go deep, do you want to do this? And I was like, okay. Yeah. And I'll never forget, one time I was driving in the car, with my husband, and he turned music on, and I was in the middle of this fast still, and he turned music on, and I was like, okay, I think it's okay, because he turned it on or whatever. And I was like, I was still in the middle of this, and I kid you not, I felt like my ears were bleeding. And we were like driving on the freeway, and I was about ready to open the car and like jump out. I had to turn it off. And he was like, what? Are you okay? And I was like, no, I'm telling you. I'm like, you have to turn it off. I don't know what's happening, but I was like, you have to turn it off, because I feel like I'm either going to jump out of this car, or my ears are just going to literally like bleed and explode. And it was like it was a crazy experience. Oh my gosh. And so then from then I was just like, okay, when is this, when is this going to be done? But it was exactly a year. And then I could listen to all kinds of things. But it was just like everything was brand new again. Everything sounded different. My sounds were different. Yeah. And so it was an incredible thing, but it was quite a sacrifice to do that. Again, talking about a year, but everything that he did within that, it really did prepare me for all of what I've been in. So yeah, so it's never just a overnight, we're used to like the drive through, like, it's not like that. But
Yeah. Because
but
there's that verse that says the glory of God to conceal a matter, the glory of kings to search it out. I mean, there are things available to us that will not reveal themselves effortlessly.
yes, and the things of the deep are meant to stay deep, because if you encounter and you experience something of the deep, and I explain it like this: if you eat something, for example, and you're just chewing it, and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, wow, and then you immediately want to tell people about it, it's like literally spitting it back out of your mouth, rather than you are chewing and you're taking the meat of it, you're allowing for it to do what it needs to do, but then you've got to swallow it. And then you've got to let it digest. Then you've got to let it, like, literally, right? Because you're taking minerals from it, you're taking all kinds of stuff. So it's like literally then becoming you.
Mm.
Then you can speak, because if you speak, you will lose it. And that's the way the deep is.
You're preaching at me, and I appreciate it. Shannon, no, 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 it's so good. It's so timely. It's accurate. That's why it's great because Shannon and I, my spiritual mom and I, we were talking about the fact that like I'm a communicator. I've been gifted that way. If you want to look at my astrological placements, there's a lot indicating that what I do and how I do it is very much God's design. And so what she and I were discussing is that sometimes the things that we get, we are too quick to share.
Mm,
We are too quick to give away. And then what happens is someone else takes it and all of its nutrients or many of its nutrients and its power that was available to us is no longer still here.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And like we're all learning how to do that. And I think that there's a lot of grace, like based on your age. I think there's a lot of grace. Like, for example, my 4-year old, I don't my expectation of what he's going to be able to like keep versus my almost 10-year-old is very different. Like if I tell my 10-year-old something and I'm like, hey, this is a surprise. I don't want you to say anything. So you have to keep it a surprise because, then, the person that we're surprising is going to know. So don't say anything. She's going to keep it. She's going to hold it probably until, the day of. And I mean, I'd be very surprised if she didn't. But, my 4-year old, no, probably not. Probably is going to spill the beans. And so it's like, is that though, for me, is that like, oh, my 4-year old, like, no, I look at it probably, and that's how God looks at it is like, oh my gosh, like he's just so excited and like there's such grace for it, you know. Would I look at my 10-year-old at the same way, like, oh, she was so excited she spilled the beans? No, I'd be like, hey, guess what? I told you something, and now I don't think I'm gonna be able to tell you it again because I think you have a hard time holding that in, and that's okay, but you can't do that because it was supposed to be a surprise or whatever. We'd like have a little conversation.
Yep.
Um, but that's I think that again, it's like it's a maturing thing,
I
and
was
we
gonna say
all
maturity determines what we get trusted with. Yeah.
yeah, and we all have like I think well, and I think there's levels of like, sharing, obviously, because I mean, I've seen people, especially with social media. I mean, gosh, they share they share so much stuff. They share so many things. And I love social media for the fact that you can really, reach a lot of people. So I do like that.
Wonderful
However,
gift.
I am I will say I'm just a little, I don't know what you would call it, but I definitely feel like there are things that are sacred. And so when you just share all of it and then sometimes in detail, like to me, it's almost like obviously I know what married couples do, but I don't need you to come on Facebook and tell me the details of what happened last night. Like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, what? No,
Yep.
so some of it comes across that way when in context, in the purity of what it is, there can be a time of sharing where it actually is really, really powerful and so amazing. But yeah, I mean, you know, I I have a group that we share, like we'll share stuff, and usually like I'll tell them things first before I tell other people. So I think that we have our like levels of sort of those circles. But yeah, I would say for sure like sacred things, and then immediately just kind of on social media would be something, it's like, okay, let's go through a maturing process for that.
I mean, you were
Um,
speaking of wisdom earlier, perhaps not wise.
perhaps not. Yeah, and again, I know that we get excited, and it's so I think most of the time it's coming from a place of, and like I said, like we're in the information age. Um, yeah, but some things, and I think that's the other thing about the time that we're in. Some things are meant for people to just find for themselves. Like there are just certain things that you cannot, I think a lot of people want you to tell me how to do it, but we're just not there anymore. This is not that time anymore. And it reminds me of, just where Moshe and Aaron and Miriam, and all those generations they die off, and you know they were the leaders. Like they were the ones that were going to go into the promised land, right? Well, no. And so the people of the time, what was their invitation? The invitation was for them to become their own Miriam, their own Aaron, and their own Moshe, because they were so dependent on them. And so, it's we're in that era. We're in the era of you have to be your own Moshe. Like you have to be your own Miriam, your own water source, right? You have to be your own Aaron, your high priest, and that is promised land. And you can't do it for people. You can't, we aren't in a place of, there were decades where it worked and stuff, but, even prophetic words, I see a lot, and I see frequency, and I could give words at times, but a lot of times I don't anymore. I mean, it's very rare
Sure.
that I give a prophetic word. But I think most of the time it's because I'm with people that I know are absolutely like they're on a path of like just massive, maturing, and they are absolutely like they are the ones that are like set apart for this time. I can see it. Like I'm like, okay, and so I'm like, they don't need that. They don't need that for me. They are going to see it for themselves. They are on that path. They're deep calls to deep. So but once in a while, every great while, there might be somebody that I, speak into, and I just kind of say what I'm seeing, and it's like a spark for them, and it helps them. But
Mhm.
really, those things are like I said, there's a sovereign move with wisdom, and it's an invitation for everybody. We can no longer have the system of one speaking person over everybody else.
Mhm.
Sort of everybody comes to get the word from them. Well, what is the word for this? What is the word for that? No, we are a community. We're going to share. We're going to, you know, just express as, together like we are.
Yep.
That's what this era looks like. Is like this, and it's sad that things have to happen and things are happening. Um, some systems that have been built heavily on men, and I mean men just in general, not like just a man, but
Right.
um, people really, really just idolize them, and those things are just crumbling. And people are just, they don't know what to do. And sadly, it's going to happen more and more. Things will come out more and more because it's not the people, it's the system. The system is not well, and it does not breed for people to be able to be their own king and priest.
Mhm.
It's set up, and I'm not against a pastor, so to speak, but unfortunately, most of those systems, it's like they are so reliant on the main person, and that seems to me more like a hospital than a place where people are really growing in who they are.
Yeah, and what was coming up for me was, there it says we were set free from the law of sin and death, and now are subject to the law of spirit and life. And so it's now, is this producing life? And if it's not, you know, prunings happen, so that more life can come forth. And it's really incumbent upon the water bearers, those whose living waters are flowing, the sons and daughters of God, to not only embody but also be able to teach what does life look like, so that the systems that aren't actually producing that can be identified. I mean, like, oh, there is better available to us.
Exactly. And that was, you know, what Yeshua was. If you look at the things that made him the most angry, it was the religious system at the time. And the reason was because it was the religious, those in leadership, that he said, like, you vipers, you not only, the problem was that they not only knew, so basically they knew the mysteries, they knew all of the mystical mysteries, yet he was like, you not only don't use them, you not only don't actually carry them and love, like basically love all of this that Yahweh has created and how we can experience this. But he's like, but you keep the people from experiencing this and knowing this. Like he was like, and again, I mean, that's why he was doing all the things like, healing on Shabbat. Like they're like, you're healing on Sabbath. Like what,
Yep.
he's just like, I didn't come for that kingdom. Like I didn't come to be in that. And
Hmm.
he completely established, something different. And, and so even to the point of, I always say like, sometimes I'm, you want to ask me what I'm doing. Sometimes I'm braiding my whip. You know, he was, he was very, very, clear about how he felt about all of that. And I believe that um, it's something that we need to still be always very clear about. And that's always something that I always, I say like, it it definitely riles me up. If there's anything that would rile me up, it's leaders who not only are using these paths themselves, they're completely corrupt, but they also keep people that are following them from doing it themselves. It's
Hmm.
just the most corrupt thing you could ever do, because that is just basically, again, that's basically breeding that same system,
Hmm.
um, and causing people to follow you instead of, like, literally instead of the Lord. I mean,
Yeah.
and so it's definitely, I think, gonna happen more and more, only because again, it's not so that way we can just keep on, um you know sort of tearing down these people, these big names, but it really is still a call for us to really, call for a change in the system, a change and shift in how we have created. I mean, really, it's become a monster. I mean, any sort of, I believe, any sort of mega church in this era, like, if you can't shift from out of that, like if you really are trademarked, and you like,
Yeah.
how can you possibly come into the new of what God's saying for your church, and for, and as it's constantly growing, and what's he saying this next year, and you can't, because you're trademarked, you have a board, you have people that give, and you literally cannot come into a new creation. And it's just, it breeds disease and sickness, and people get caught up in that, and it's like, it's not the ancient way. It's not how, again, even when Yeshua came, he didn't come for that. He wasn't like, let me just, get in the
Mm-mm.
synagogue and be with these guys up here that are, you know, um, considered to be the high holy ones. He was like, you are corrupt. I
Yep.
don't want anything to do with what you're doing. And that was who he was calling out. He didn't even call out the political system of the day. He didn't even come and rise up against uh Pilate, and he wasn't even he was like, that's not what I'm here for.
That's a
I'm
good
not.
point. Yeah,
He made it very clear though with the religious system.
yep,
So that's, yeah, that's definitely, I think, where we are. So, you know, it's hard to see people get caught up in that and hurt from that. But
oh,
I think
especially that.
that, you know, I think that that's what our communities are for, is to really begin to embrace people um, that just, they don't really know what safe even means. And,
Mhm.
my immersives, for example, have been, um, that's, I always tell people, I'm like, this is a safe place. And I mean that in the sense that they don't have to do anything. Like, there's not, whatever's being taught or whatever's being shared, it's like there's nothing that's being pressured, like, you need to believe this, or you need to, it's like, no, it's completely a safe place for
Yep,
them to experience, really, finally, what Yahweh is saying to them. Like, no person in the middle of that trying to, like, and then all of us are all there as a support system saying, we're here. Like, you have people, and we're not going anywhere.
I agree. One of my core heart values is creating safe places for people. I had a coworker years ago, and he said I gave him a hug, and I've always been a big hugger because the Lord did so much healing for me through hugs. And so to me, a hug is that physical representation of a safe place. You are safe, you are loved, you're cared and embraced here with no performance, no agenda, except just that you would know and experience that. And after I gave him a hug, he told me later, like much later, he said, first time you hugged me was the first time I ever got hugged by a man who didn't want sex from me. And like, my mind was just blown. Like, you have no idea the life stories that people are walking around living. And in the
Hmm.
simplicity of creating a simple, safe hug space, they're introduced to a different way that's available to them, a new way of experiencing life and wholeness and freedom and love and acceptance and all these things that God gives us, that we're so fortunate to have experienced from Him, that we then hope to help others experience. But safe places are huge, and the traumas and the abuses and the systemic abuses and all the things that people are masking but are having experienced, safe places are so important, that so that they can truly rest. Because if you can never be at rest, then you can't really ever experience love, because love is only ever experienced at rest. If you're still performing, it's not really love. um
Yeah, exactly. And there's just a real a fight or flight that people are in, that I've come to see. And so during the immersives, you know um it's like they find the that safe place to kind of let go. And sometimes it's like deep rest. A lot of times, actually, that's one of the testimonies that we get, is like, people will say, I never sleep. And like, this lady at the most recent one, she woke up and she said, she came down in the kitchen the next morning. She goes, I just slept 9 hours. And we were like, that's great. She's like, I don't sleep. She's like, I needed that. I forgot what it feels like to sleep like that. And so it's like, sometimes it's like this deep rest that sets in. Um, and I love that there's always this point where, you know, there's this ceremony that always happens in every single one. So it's always different what it looks like, but there's always this ceremony. And then it's kind of like after a wedding ceremony, you experience this immense joy. And I always tell people, I'm like, just wait for it, because you're gonna you're going to party, and you're going to party in a frequency that's so high that you're going to be like, I haven't felt like that ever. And so we end up having these experiences together where we have the most fun. I mean, we laugh until our stomach hurts, but we dance together. And what I love about it the most is like we spend this time together, and then it's so pure, it's so holy. And we end up dancing together, and it's men and women, and we're, some of us are married, some of us aren't. And we're like, nobody's in any way, in any agenda of any kind other than just pure joy.
Yeah.
And it's
And
the most
ecstasy,
healing.
ecstatic dance and all that. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's the most healing experience for some people, because they'll be like, oh my gosh, I don't remember the last time that I danced. That's one of the things we hear sometimes. And the other is that people will say, I really have not enjoyed like dancing or music like that in that way. Like, it has such a tainted thing for me. And
Yeah.
so it really takes it, and there's like something so pure in it that it's just changed us all. I mean, even myself, it just changed me so deeply. And I grew up like, my mom's born in Costa Rica, so I grew up with like Latin music and dancing. So I was very
Oh,
comfortable with Latin music and
yeah.
dancing. But there was something kind of, I would say, 7 years ago, like before that, with some of my community prior to all of this, where I remember, it was kind of like I just had this feeling like we had known each other for so long, but I was like, I feel like I don't really like, we don't really know each other. But also, I would always be like, these people are just not very fun. I mean, that's just the honest truth. But I
Yeah.
would just be like, they're not very fun. I know we do ministry, like we would do 24-hour worship gatherings and all kinds of stuff like that. And we'd have amazing worship times. But I don't know. There was like something though, once that was done,
Yep.
it was like there was no relating on a deep, deep level. Like we knew each other. We went to each other's, kids' birthday parties. Like we did all that stuff, but there just wasn't. And then there definitely wasn't like this aspect of just really deep fun and letting go where you experience this childlike place, and nobody's trying to like keep a persona of, oh, I'm a leader and so I got to act a certain way, but everyone's just equals. And, just having a good time, like having a laugh, and it's not taking yourself so seriously. Like, I think that that's what helped me and healed me really, was I started to just let go. And I was like, if people don't like me, then they don't like me. And it's okay, because that was my fear in the prior time
Yep.
before the 7 years, was if I really was that person, I was like, well, what if they don't like me? Like, and I've just been so deeply healed through all this that I'm like, oh, well.
So what's your joy music?
Oh my goodness. Well, we have a couple of songs that are kind of like they're nostalgic to us because we have like these funny moments about it. But
Sure.
so I always dedicate at the immersives, I always dedicate the song "The Time of Our Life" from Dirty
Right.
Dancing.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, where they're doing
Time
stuff.
has,
And
yeah.
yeah, so I always dedicate that. And it's just like everyone's laughing, and there's like, and the very first time, the funny thing about it is the very first time I played it, one of the first immersives, um there was two people that I was like trying to get. I was like, you guys do the lift, do it. And like one of the guy was like trying to like lift my friend, and she didn't know what was happening. So she was like, "What are you doing?" And we're like laughing. Everyone's like crying. And
Yep.
it's so funny because actually they are literally engaged now and going to get married in September. So
Oh,
now they like this past immersive, they like did the lift and we were like, yes, and it was just so funny because it was like this whole thing from one of the other ones. But there's that one and so the guys, we always have the guys for some reason. I think during the first one, the Michael Bublé feeling good.
oh yeah.
Um, they have to always do like the micro the hand microphone and they are
Of course.
Michael Bublé, little kick in there, and it's hilarious. So we have like we've had these moments together that have just been so funny. And then I don't know, we have these crazy moments. Someone brought really tiny hands to the immersive. So
Okay.
don't don't ask. And so they were like dancing with the tiny hands and like twirling people with the tiny hands. And
Right.
it was just so just yeah, there was like just so many moments where we were just like laughing because everybody was just not taking themselves seriously, just
Yeah.
being, really fun and funny and yeah, and everybody by the end was up and dancing, every single person. And so, it's just, I always say that one of the greatest things that heals is joy. And
Yep.
in Hebrew, it's called simcha. And simcha is something that, like, you can literally write this. You can put simcha in the Hebrew letters, write it on a piece of paper, put it in soil where plants are, and the plants will grow like 10 times greater, stronger than other plants. You could put it in water. You could put it's because of the frequency of simcha. So simcha is joy in Hebrew. And so the frequency of it and what it releases out into the field, in our field
Yeah.
is powerful.
I don't know if I'm supposed to sit with that one, but I have several people immediately that I want to share that with.
Yeah. Oh no, no, go ahead. That's a
That's not a deep
it's
water I
a
need to sit with.
no, no, no. It's just well, with what joy is, and when you look at it in
Yeah.
scripture, but it has to do with the gematria of joy. But so of course, Yahweh knew.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's they call it pure simcha, pure joy will heal. I think that they've linked it to basically almost all disease, like inflammation. Um, yeah, there's a whole study
I'm gonna
of
put that on my water bottle.
yeah,
I'm
you
gonna
can put it
drink
on your
joy
water.
every time.
Yeah, you can put it on your water, and it will literally affect the water. Yeah, so but you put the letters because again, each one has a frequency and a gematria to it. It's
Yes.
pretty amazing. So
I've got a
yeah.
gardener friend I'm gonna be sharing that with because he's all into gardening. Say,
Mhm.
hey, bro, plant it in the soil.
Yeah. Yeah, you can plant it in the soil.
Why not?
It's pretty amazing.
My
It's
my expectation for dance parties, well, my heavenly dance party expectation is like I like EDM music, I like electronica dance type music, but
oh, huh.
I want it to experience it the way that John Paul Jackson talked about it years ago. If you've heard of him, hey, his
Mhm.
heavenly experiences were like if you think heaven is dull, you do not know what heaven is like. Like the movement of color and the ecstatic dance, like the energy and the color and the lights of the movement, like that's what is evoked in me when I think about like a rave. Like I don't I'm not interested in the drug culture, but I think that is an attempt to sort of copy on an earthly from the earth, from the earth up instead of heaven down, what's available to us there. Because I've hit some songs that have felt as ecstatic and as much of a high for me as anything I ever felt in like a worship service. There was an exaltation and an adoration and a like there is a heavenly vibe happening here. And I want that so much for people. I want the freedom that's really what we were made for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what you, so there's a whole, like, this is like a whole other, I don't know, probably like a whole other call. um, but there's a guy who, I think it's like recently, just within the last year, he he's been talking a lot about the sound of the elemental table. So the frequencies of the elements. And so he's been tying it into, because basically, everything is frequency.
Yeah.
So he's been bringing the notes and like, or the sounds, um, through light. Because if you take light, then you can basically take those colors, and then you can take the colors and you can play it in music. Then you can take that and you can actually play it based off of those colors. So that's basically frequency, because frequency is light. So based off of the light, the frequency that comes off of the elements, he's been playing the elemental table. And I'm like, okay, that basically to me is like, if you, so certain songs, like you're talking about, certain songs that make you feel like you're just like, this is the best ever, like, what it's basically doing is it's playing your like maybe your DNA, or it's playing your molecular structure. So you're literally lit up, and you're in the most ecstasy.
Yes. There's
So
one that comes to mind, and I definitely, it's like my whole body is like, yes, whatever this is. And I heard it once, and I didn't know what channel I was listening to. I never could have found it again until I like heard it again. Same feeling. And I was like, there is something in this song that is for me.
yeah, absolutely. And people may know that they're doing it, like the people who write the songs, they may know or they may not know. They just, because I mean, everybody's being creative. So in that flow, they just may hit a particular sequence, and that, but yeah, I mean, I think that that's why we're now like on the verge of, I'm sure that it's going to be like an actual composition, probably, where somebody will compose the table of elements. I mean, he's already sharing this. He just shared it. It was a summit this past spring, I think. And so it's just like, wow. I mean,
That's
it's
gonna be
that now it's coming. Mm-hmm.
well,
Oh
like
yeah.
you were teaching the other day that I listened to about neon and darkness and how, and then I commented because I was watching the replay. Commented, I was like, well, neon you see in like clubs and bars and like these dark environments, or the connection there of like where we experience neon in our cultures is typically in these dark places. But I wonder what the sound of neon is, and if there's some connection even in the environments where it exists. Color me
Exactly.
curious.
And so it's so cool, because what you really see in all that is like, Yahweh is coming through in everything. No, like even the darkest of places, um, there's still these frequencies like happening, and they're his, because again, the elemental table. And so you have things like you're talking about, like neon, and you know, um, and it's like being incorporated in places that um, they may not know it on the forefront, but it's like innately it's being brought, and it
Even if they don't
really,
know why, they know it belongs.
exactly, and it's just, that's why the whole table of elements is just, it's blown things open so wide and deep and far, that I believe that, and now again, like I said, this guy is playing the elements. I'm just like, this is absolutely, this is the shift we're in for sure. Like, this is what's going to change everything, because we're, again, like I said, we're now beginning to understand that everything is frequency, everything is is vibration and energy.
Yep.
So, can you heal through frequency and energy? Yeah, you can.
Mhm.
So this is a this is just a huge, huge, huge deal. I mean, I was like, wow, has anybody ever done this? And I was like, no, actually, nobody has ever played the elemental table, not like this. And then there's like a few other things that you can find out there, but I'm like, this is the beginning. Like, this is scratching the surface. They're gonna take this, you know. So it's it's pretty amazing, especially because he got to share again, like on a summit, like chemistry worldwide level. That I'm like, okay, this is gonna, they're gonna take this and expand in it and everything. So yeah, and I was listening to some of the sounds, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was loving it. I mean, I loved it. I loved the sound. I think they were playing the sound. I think they played helium. He played helium, and I was like, I love that. I loved it. I was just like, okay, this is why I'm in the table of elements, because these frequencies are like my jam. So yeah, it's really, you might be able to look that up on YouTube and listen, but it's really cool. It's so cool.
Yeah, I'm going to investigate. I mean, that's a whole new layer to the foundations of our creation,
Yeah,
experience.
the frequency of hydrogen.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, I look
obviously
forward
we
to
know,
hearing what that sounds like.
yeah,
There
it's
was somebody I heard at a conference recently who said the age that we're living in now exists, like the technology age exists based on one relationship between silica and electricity. We built an entire technology age around one natural relationship. And what more is available to us as we discover new relationships in creation? And I was like, oh my gosh, we could build in a whole new era of the human experience in this created world and multidimensional world as we uncover maybe just one other new relationship. That was just electricity and silica to build a microchip for technology, to do all that we've done with that. What else is possible? Like that, the one thing that became all this made me like, oh my gosh, what else is really possible that
yeah.
we haven't fathomed?
Yeah, well, and I shared on my page about the research that just came out with regarding to hydrogen, and how they basically blew that wide open very recently, and just said that they had thought that hydrogen had operated a particular way, and through new technology they were able to basically like observe it, and they realized they were completely wrong. And so they're like, this changes everything, which I was like, I know why, because everything came through hydrogen, all the other elements. So now they're like, we have to relook at every other element. So I'm just like, whoa. So
Whoa.
that research paper was saying like they literally now have to like rewrite science books because of what they just uncovered with hydrogen or water, that whole process. And I'm just like, wow,
I love
that,
that.
yeah, that just happened.
I'm gonna have to check that out because I mean, all the things. I mean, we like to think that science is so concrete and unchanging, and yet there is new revelation that's now like everything we thought we knew a certain
Right.
way will all shift. And I was gonna say this earlier, but honestly, that's been my whole relationship with God anyway. Because the university that I went to was not how I was brought up at all. It was a very charismatic university, and I grew up a very traditional upbringing. And so when I got there, I was seeing and hearing, and I mean, I just took a left turn, but it's coming back to this place of like, I got there and I was like, God, I don't know if this is you. I don't know what they're teaching. I've never heard these things before. And so my foundation became everything I think I understand about you is subject to change except you. And that became now, I think, the foundation for why I'm so comfortable with mystery and I'm so comfortable with new things coming my way and new revelation. And the breeding ground of my heart is like, he's my foundation, but everything I think I know, I can hold loosely because that bedrock is my peace. A bedrock is the anchor for my soul. And then everything else can unfold and change and flux, but that doesn't.
Right. Absolutely. And the I think that that's always innately in us. Like, I haven't taught on the foundation stone because people it's just it hasn't been time yet, but I've mentioned it a couple of times. But basically the foundation stone is, I would say, also you can connect it to Yeshua as the cornerstone, right? He says, I am the cornerstone. But so there's that aspect of the the foundation stone will remain and it will never ever change. And we are living stones that came from the deep of that, and that was the original, which is Elohim. But so that is like that is um, that will never. That's the place where it says like he doesn't change. But yet you have all these elements. You have all of the Hebrew letters, and you have the ability to experience things in a whole new way. And it is ancient, but I really have felt like it's there's combinations of things I think that are really for the sons to seek out. And so it just it makes me think of how some of us, like, you and I, we hadn't met yet. And so it was like, then there's this actual meeting, and it's a whole new thing, like the aspects of you and the aspects of me, and what that creates and what that forms. Same thing with those that we haven't met yet that we're supposed to.
Hmm.
It's like there's this aspect of that it's like it's exciting because it hasn't ever been, like this is a whole new how the elements are, they have this sort of chemical bond, and that's like what's happening is like there's this new chemical bond in the earth happening. And so it's just creating this whole structure like on an atomic level. And that's what I always see, like with what you described, is it's like there's a foundation stone that remains and stays the same. But whatever we create and whatever happens from that, I'm like, I let go, and I'm not trying to control, or it has to be something that makes sense. It has to be something that I already have in my grid. It has to be something, it's like, no, it doesn't. It can really create a new thing. And that's really what I've been excited about, is seeing that come through, because it is mirroring, like it's the spirit is mirroring the natural. So that research that I shared, the reason that they have discovered this of this hydrogen thing, and it's like changing science, is because in the spirit, inward with us, we have discovered hydrogen again. Like we've discovered
Hmm.
water, and we're saying, okay, wow, what is water? And we're like looking at it, and it's like, oh, of course it's going to happen in the natural because it's happening in the spirit. So, that's always where I'm at, where I'm just like, you know, as long as I've got the foundation stone, um, everything else can literally change, and I'll work through it. I'll work through it. It's okay,
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but
Or without the
that's
foundation stone, you see in our culture, you know, the anxiety that has become so commonplace, uh, because without a foundation,
the
everything
con-
shakes. Everything that
yeah,
can be shaken will be shaken, right? So the what can't be shaken will remain.
the cons the constant and what remains is so important, because like that's always what I see in the I love Marvel movies. I love superhero
Mhm.
stuff. Like it always
Uh-huh.
speaks to me.
Yep.
Um, and what's interesting though about those movies is what you see is that, like, because most of the time, which most Marvel movies, they're not necessarily coming from a perspective of a son who actually has like an intimate relationship with God. Like they're still hearing things, and so you still feel and you see these things that you're like, oh my gosh, that speaks to me so deeply. Do they know what they're doing? So you see those things come through. But what I always find interesting is it's like there's this, like you always see that overarching question of like, what's going to happen, and there's like something overtaking the universe, and it just seems like everything's going to end with no sort of plan, with nobody sort of, that's the constant, right? Like with that, there's always sort of like some sort of villain or something coming in to kind of destroy everything. And so the movie's always like moving towards like, where's this all going? And I love them, but I'm always like, okay, see, they don't feel, and they don't have that security of the foundation stone saying, it doesn't matter what happens, doesn't matter who rises up and tries, what king rises up, what country rises up, throws a nuclear bomb, I don't know. Whatever happens, Yahweh is sovereign, and it's his foundation stone. And so you cannot just like wipe out everybody, because that's not his, like he won't ever remove that. And Yeshua he is that cornerstone. So it's always interesting when you see that perspective, because you're like, wow, they don't have that. So it comes through in the storylines, where if you're not a believer, you do kind of, you're like, wow, like is the earth just going to end in like some like cosmic
Right.
collision, and we're just like, that's it? And like you
Everything
have
really feels world ending. Yeah.
exactly, and you're just like, well, I mean, things might happen for sure as we move forward with world events, but it's like there's there's a sovereign.
Yeah. There is a
um
foundation that those events will not move or shake or touch.
exactly, so it's important that we understand that. And I like I said, I think you know I'll probably go into that in the next, maybe in the summer. But it's important, like it's really key to being able to let go and understand that change is inevitable. And I mean, it's like, it really is something that you try to find that ebb and flow of, because the seasons change. I mean,
Mhm.
nothing stays the same in nature,
I
in the
mean, he
sense
said,
that
behold, I do a new thing. And if he's going to be the God who does more than we could ask for or imagine, then there are going to be the things that we can't imagine that he's going to do.
exactly. Yeah, and I think and I think him showing himself um in the earth realm through creation, like in a whole new way, I think it's going to shake up some people, because their grid, their framework, it just doesn't allow for a god of the universe, or Yahweh. It's
Yeah.
a lot of people are again, a lot of people are still obsessed and enamored with Jesus. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a relationship. Obviously, you should. But yeah, the Yeshua said the greatest honor is for him to take you to the Father. And that is far more than salvation, because Yeshua is
Yeah.
salvation. So Yeshua in the Hebrew, the literal translation of Yeshua is salvation. So Yeshua is salvation. So what was he talking about when he said, my greatest desire and honor is to take you to the Father? Well, because when he came to earth, he was like, I'm just doing what I see my Father do. I'm just doing what I see Yahweh do.
Yeah.
So it's not like he wasn't pointing to him. He wasn't like, I am. So, and which he did say I am, but he wasn't like just me. He would talk about how they are one, how Yahweh and him are one. He would constantly try to get the disciples to understand that. And I think that that's probably where a lot of people are stuck, is stuck
Yeah.
in that love affair with Yeshua, which, I mean, I get it, I understand, but it's a process. It's a process to walk that out, because you really do, you begin to feel almost guilty. I remember when I started to like not say Yeshua as much, and I would say Yahweh, and I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Uh,
And she was like, we're not in competition. You don't have to say you're sorry. Like, obviously, when you say Yahweh, I know you mean me.
yeah.
And I know you mean Ruach HaKodesh, because we're one. And he was like, you have to get to that place where you really like are settled in that and understand it, And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. That's what this journey's about.
Yeah.
Um,
When they use one, as you know, well, no, it's one where there is another, not one where it's singular. And if you
exactly.
only read the English, you miss that. But the word one there is one where there is another. They speak of themselves in their oneness.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the frequency that Yahweh carries. Yahweh, you know, the Shema is not just Old Testament, and the Shema is constantly going out every day in Israel. But the Shema is not just Old Testament. They ask Yeshua in the New Testament, what is the greatest commandment? And he points to the Shema. He says, listen, or Shema Israel,
Yeah.
listen, Israel, Adonai is one. That's literally what he points to, which is the Shema. And that's what's constantly being said, is that Adonai is one, because we have been very separate. We've been very separate in our, you know, Godhead, I guess, or divine nature,
Yeah.
which is why we're very separate within us, like within ourselves. We've been very separated. But that's what's coming. Everything that's scattered is coming back and returning to one and oneness. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that that's been really exciting too, is like to see people experience, like for the very first time, like the ancient ways
Mhm.
of Yahweh, and they're just like, wow, I feel like a new person, like life is just brand new. And I'm like, yeah, isn't that so cool? Like it's ancient, but it's new.
Yeah.
It's ancient, but it's new to us, because um, we've been taught a lot of very different things. But yeah, it's definitely a time of the deep, a time of water. And yeah, we have definitely shifted into that. Like we aren't we are not like on the verge of it anymore. We are
No.
absolutely in this new era, completely
Oh yeah,
completely.
for sure. We were thrust into it. I said, COVID was the gift I wouldn't have asked for, in that it was this global Selah. And then
Yeah.
as everybody kept saying, we were our own prophets for so long. Everybody was like, welcome to the new normal. This is the new normal. And we were literally just continuing to speak that the old ways were no more, as we're still, people weren't sure what that meant, and how far those tremors and shifts were going to go. But the systems that people were living in, suddenly they were not okay. And people were like, I'm not okay with the job I had and the lifestyle that I had before. I'm not okay with where I was living. So a lot of the norms, people were like, nope. So, I mean, the mega church example you gave, I was like, yeah. I mean, people stopped going to corporate offices. They were like, no, I'm going to work from home. If I can't work from home, I want a different job. I want to be with my family more. I don't want to make this commute. Like, people stopped feeding the systems that weren't producing life, which is what we've mentioned more than once, if these systems are not producing life, they literally set themselves up against the character and nature of God, because it was for freedom that Christ set us free. If these systems are not producing freedom, if they're not producing life, he will not sustain them.
Yeah.
You can try to do it in your own strength, but they will crumble. The fruit will tell the story.
Yeah, exactly. And, so, and that's, COVID was just it was, I'm not, I don't like to say oh, there's so much gloom coming, or doom, but COVID was definitely like just a little glimpse, I think, of some further things to come. But no matter what, like you're saying, so many amazing things came out of COVID, Again, it's not like Yahweh wasn't sovereign.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, people have agendas? Okay. He was like, I still have my plan. And so out of COVID, yeah, there's a lot that happened because I think all of us, we all were being presented with things to look at, look at these things, wake up, wake up. And so many people realized, I think probably the value of life, just that you don't know what's going to happen from one
Yep.
day to the next.
For a brief moment, we also realized how truly connected the human race is.
Exactly. Everybody was just in the same boat. Everybody was experiencing the same thing. There wasn't anybody who wasn't, experiencing that time and what we were all trying to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
But through it, we woke up, and there absolutely was a reset. And the reset, I think, everything. So everything originates in heaven, which is why there's a sovereign plan. So everything originates in heaven, and then it happens in the earth. So who appoints the kings or the leaders? Well, no matter what, Yahweh is still Yahweh.
Yeah,
And
he
so
said he holds the hearts of kings in his hands and he turns them which way he wants.
so he's still sovereign. And people do have their choice and do things. But there was a reset with Israel. And when something originates in heaven, the place that you see it go first is always Israel. That's where things happen. And it's like, oh, let's test it out here. It happens here first. And it always does. Well, COVID, Israel was like, oh, we'll be first to kind of experiment and do all the, well, it was, yeah, there was a lot that happened, and a lot of tough things, but also through that, he shut it down. He put a reset. And so what was happening and what it looks like to us of the spiritual aspect that we have to pay attention and tune into is that Israel was sort of being, for a long time, it's like it's used and it's like it's used and it's abused, so to speak. I love your treasures and I just kind of want to take from you. And it's like that's what has happened to it. And so in that sense, it's like there's like a prostitution that had been happening, so to speak. And so what happened was it was like it all just like shut down. He shut the land down. He shut down everything all over. And it was like there was a slumber that happened. And then what was able to take place out of that was that still to this day, that land is not able to go back into what it was in, which was just, I just want to, use your spoils, come in, all these groups, all these people coming. I'm not saying tours aren't bad, but everybody coming to just I just want to, have a ticket to see the thing, and missing the whole point of all of it. But also it was like just this cash cow and all of the things. And it there's a lot that was going on. And so it was like it totally changed all that. And what happened was it just completely like set things in motion. And Yahweh was like, you know what? If the sons are ready, he was like, I'm not going to have any more delay. And so what happened from that was it's like there's no more delay. So now you have a rolling sort of term, these events that are happening. And he's like, yeah, no more going back to business as usual. There is no business as usual in Israel because there's like this events happening. Obviously, war broke out. They're still trying to figure that out. But from here is where you go, what's going to happen on the horizon with all that, and then you just kind of look at the world and the world stage and how the leaders will, kind of fall into that. But all that to say, he used it to answer the heart cries of people that were saying, we don't want to be, basically, there was a mass exodus that happened in the Bible, but it also just happened. And so he was answering the cries of people caught in slavery. And he's like, okay, this is going to be a mass exodus again. And so now we have this opportunity to, experience what it's like to live outside of Egypt and where we had been enslaved.
Yep.
But we all know, like, there's this journey to get to the promised land, because Egypt represents Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim is like very much still ingrained in you. And so that's why, like, for what was it, 40 years, the Israelites had to go round and round, not because God was angry or mad or like punishing them. It was because they had Egypt still in them so deeply that they had to like continue, because what would they have done? They would have literally just cultivated that within the promised land.
Yep.
A little Egypt.
Yep.
I mean, so COVID was a learning step to, I think, some other things, but God used it, and it was so sovereign, and he's going to continue to do that with anything we face. He is going to bring such good from all of it, because that's what we have to pay attention to, is what heaven is saying, rather than just focusing on the earth. But yeah, it's it was needed. It was hard. It's really hard, but it was really needed.
And there were people who experienced really hard things during that period and lost loved ones. And it makes me think of that scene in The Shack, if you've seen it, which is such a great film, where Sam is speaking to Olivia's character, the God character, the father character, and is angry about what's happened to his daughter, and is wanting to blame him. And she says, just because I can bring good out of tragedy doesn't mean that I caused the tragedy. And it was such a healing moment for him to be like, he gave us the capacity, as you've pointed out more than once, he gave us the capacity to make choices, to make our own kingdoms, to do what we want with the free will that we were given. And he's honored that. And what we've created in the world and the systems that people have created with nefarious agendas or the best of intentions, will produce their fruit. And we are experiencing those in the earth. But that and the fruits of those, God will still work together for our good in our lives, because he loves us. And that is the beauty of what relationship with him shows us. But as she said so poetically and simply, just because I can bring good out of tragedy doesn't mean I caused the tragedy. And that is that. I think that was a very real part of that experience for many people too.
Yeah. I mean, it it really is, I think, like, it's a hard thing for people, um, to kind of accept going through something that it's going to be, a hardship, a really, really, really difficult thing.
Yep.
Um, but there's so much about those circumstances though that it, if we don't face them, it's just we're going to keep going round and round and round the mountain. And it's like we just have to face our fears, like, and it's not about always just drinking from that cup of suffering either. I mean, I don't believe in that, but um we live in a world where you experience life, and life can be, painful and hard at times. I mean, it's just like birth. Birth is painful, and it's not without its beauty though. It's one of the most incredible experiences you could ever experience. But it's painful, and for anybody to tell you like, "Oh, it's just going to feel like sunshine and rainbows." Get out of here with that. Probably not. I mean, unless the person's literally knocked out and doesn't feel a thing. Even women who have cesarean, it's a gnarly recovery, but you forget about it the moment you see your baby. So it's, and then, yes, crazy women, we do it all over again.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, the
um,
fruit was worth it, apparently.
exactly. Um, so anybody who is, you know, preaching or teaching a gospel that says that, there is no pain or suffering within Yeshua is not being honest or truthful, because even Yeshua, he experienced a lot of pain and suffering, obviously. Um, but you know, that's what I love about Yeshua, is that, he wasn't murdered. Nobody killed Yeshua. He
Yeah.
laid his life down. And that's who we are. We are people who every day we lay our lives down and we say, it's not about just what I'm comfortable with. And there are days and moments where you experience the most amazing things, and you get to experience, you know, um, amazing pleasures and beautiful things. But there are moments where you experience deep sadnesses or painful things.
Yeah.
Um, but you realize how much beauty comes out of that. And really, you can literally go from ashes to beauty. And that's, he will trade you. And it's something that I always encourage people, like, don't avoid those moments. Just walk right into them, and this too shall pass. It's not forever.
Right.
It's never forever. But what you're afraid of is worse than probably the situation that you're needing to walk through. The fear is far worse than the actual thing, and I mean that from even, my mom transitioned in July. And so I'm even talking from an experience of like losing somebody that you love dearly.
Yeah.
um but you realize that the fear surrounding it is far more deathly and crippling to you than the actual situation.
Yeah.
And there's just beauty. There's beauty even in something like that. I found myself experiencing such beauty because of who God is.
Agreed. My biggest loss was the loss of my best friend years ago. And for me, it was particularly painful because as a child, all I'd ever wanted was a best friend. Like it was the one thing I longed for. So when I found that, when my soul found what my dad called the Jonathan to my David, um, my soul latched on super hard, and we were inseparable and did everything together. And so when he was suddenly taken, it was a Mack truck ran a red light, and he was, gone. And the grief like felt like it tore my soul. And it's the reason now that I pray for people who are experiencing grief and loss the way that I do, because there's a pain that you experience that the physical comforts can't touch. But through that season, the intimacy that I experienced with the Lord, I would not trade. So I do refer to it as the gift I wouldn't have asked for, because walking through that with the Lord produced a depth to the anchor in my soul with him that was not there before, and that is now unshakable. And so it's a beauty that I'm grateful for, and I would not trade. I wouldn't have asked for it. I would have preferred it not have had to happen that way. But
Well, Yeshua even said, like, if this cup will pass, let it pass. But then he said, not my will, but yours. So
yes.
yeah. So that sums it up, right? If the cup will pass, then let it pass, but not my will, but yours.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's a really blessed life, honestly. That's an amazing life to live. You know, um, that's not that is not a God who is just, forcing you to to fulfill his commandments. And it really is you understanding that, like, it's the best of life, like it's the greatest of life. And he designed us, he created us. So, like, he really, really does want us to, live the best life. And, you know, we actually cause more harm most of the time, by decisions that we make, and his will isn't about keeping us from, fun. And, it's just this religious law. It really is so beautiful and the most incredible thing you could ever, ever, ever be in. Um, Life giving.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Agreed. um I heard you say something earlier that you're only the second person I've ever met who said that you see frequency.
Mm, hmm.
And the only other person I've met was this man in Portugal who actually created this water bottle that I've been drinking from, because he sees frequency with his eyes. I've heard of like seer gifts, but you said seeing frequency. And how do you experience that? He didn't fully unpack it because it's not something he's super like boastful about or whatever. But he could see on my body colors of frequency where I was having issues in my physiology. He could point to them and say, "Hey, this is off." Da, 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 da. How do you experience life seeing frequency?
Well, it has to do with frequency. So whenever somebody is around me, or, I'm talking to somebody, it's basically your frequency. There's a resonance and a vibration to it.
Yeah.
And the frequency then becomes light waves. So then I can see certain light waves. So it's not, I wouldn't describe it, for me, it's not like I'm like, oh, you've got stuck energy here or whatever. I mean, maybe if, like, that's what I'm seeing, but it's not. It's more about, I see in frequency, and I see, like, the the expression of people. Like, I can see colors and frequency coming. And most of the time, it's just, I don't know, it's been for so long. So, but I just I hear frequency. um yeah, and so it's not just with people, like, it's
Yeah.
a lot of different things. But
Yeah.
yeah, so but it's basically your frequency and your vibration, and I can hear it. And then there's colors to it. So um yeah.
I love that because I mean, the way he said it, for him, it I think drove him into a lot of his science studies and discovery, because he could see the natural world, he could see frequency, he could see what was producing life. So as those vibrations were changing, it motivated, I think, his creations, which I found just so fascinating, because as if everything's frequency and you can actually see what the impact of your choices or this creation or this, what this water or what this food is doing, like when you can see it in real time, the impact on a particular frequency, that would just change. It would change the way that people would live their lives, for one. I mean, when you can actually see
Mhm.
the cost vibrationally, frequency, all of that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's like, that's why I always, um, I just like, usually I'll sit and just listen to somebody's frequency.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's like how I get to know them more than probably anything is just sitting and listening to their frequency. So some of my closest friends, like, we don't even have to talk because I mean we do, but like I hear their frequency. I know exactly like what I don't know. I know what they're about to say to me, or I know what they're yeah. So it's like it's a cool thing to be able to experience for sure. But it's yeah. I mean like for you, I don't know if you know, but you have a lot of green.
Oh no, never heard
You have a
that.
lot of and green is um like high frequency. Green is um like Yahweh's throne, like emerald. That is like what covers his throne, like emerald greens. um yeah, green is a lot of people think like green is connected to money.
Yep.
That's just a byproduct. Like money is an energy and a frequency. It's just like money isn't hard to me. I'm like money isn't hard.
Mhm.
But once you have wisdom, you're not like, oh, just give me all the money. Like, I'm like, no, like, I want to, I want to go on a process and a journey, and whatever I'm supposed to have, I'll have as my heart is ready for it. So I'm not like, just give me all the money. Although I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely like, I'm not trying to be poor.
No, I'm
You know,
willing to receive. Absolutely.
I'm willing to receive everything, but I'm like that my heart would be ready, and all of that. So but and I mean that also not just like that you just spend frivolously. I mean that in a way of that you would be um that I would be able to um understand what it looks like in not in the earthly realm even of business and all of that, but how that I would be ready to be able to take that and really, really multiply it and all that stuff. And I know that that's a journey, so I'm not like egotistical and saying, oh, yeah, give me all the money because I would know what to do with it. I mean, at this point, I'm a little bit more knowledgeable, but honestly, I'm like, I still need a little bit more time to like really, really understand how to navigate that. Um, but green is definitely um like supply, it's like resource, and of course money is in there. But anyways, but I just didn't want you to like think like I'm talking about just money, but you
Oh,
do have this green, you have a lot of greens. And it's an amazing thing. It's really great. Yeah, that's just what I heard the very first time we started talking, and then I saw it, so I just wanted to share
yeah.
that. It's just a little.
No, I'm so
Yeah.
glad. It's encouraging and confirming in a different way. We can unpack. But thank you. No, I'm grateful that you took the moment to share that. Um, I'm grateful all the way around. I don't see frequency, but I definitely am a feeler. Um, and so I have enjoyed your frequency, the field that you create, that you carry, that you emit very much, just from the first teaching. Um, the purity of it, the lightness of it, the sweetness of it, um, the love that you have in it, the care, the honor, like you embody and you transmit those so beautifully. um, which just makes drawing near to hear what you have to say all that sweeter.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's like I said, it's an honor. Thank you for asking me to be on. I mean, it's like 10 o'clock. I mean, we
Perfect.
we definitely talked for a good amount of time, which is awesome. But
I gave people a heads up.
you
I
know,
told them they could come back.
it's so awesome, actually, I would say, to add on, that I was like, oh, what should I wear? And I put on green, and
I did notice that.
yeah, and like, because your greens are like greens, blues, which blue is like, don't get me started with blues. It's just blue. I love blue. So
I'm all
much.
blue.
Yeah. So the greens is like blues too, like there's like this like aqua, marine, like, so yeah, that's like all in there. So I think it's, I was just kind of responding to,
You were.
which is so cool. I love that. That's yeah, that's what's happening there. So
And as
um
a conversation about water, all of the blue hues that you have and this blue background, it just all seem to
exactly,
work.
and probably why you said you were a swimmer and things like that. It's like you're really connected to that green, the blues, like those are that's that sort of scheme how you would go down. I always look at like the color wheel as you would like go from the green to the blue, like you're probably your expression is probably in those keys, which is fantastic. And everybody has, like, you have other colors, but
Yeah.
like, you know, that's awesome to be able to see and experience. And this has been such an amazing call. I mean, you have to tell me how I can share it with my people, because
I will.
this has been awesome. Wow.
I absolutely
Thank
will. Oh, and while I'm thinking about it, let's put this up. So, for you guys who want to be able to find Kerah, this is her website. So, connect with her there. The other intensives and events that she hosts and other teachings, all of those things, as I understand it, right, will all be able to be connected to through that.
Yes, yeah. So if you go to craftsman120global.com, you can register, and then you'll receive emails to just keep updated with anything I'm doing. And yeah, all the members of my website, it's free. You don't, it's not a cost. Um, Always get kind of the information first of stuff. So I would say go and just enter your info. It's really just your name and your email. And then I'm not email crazy with my website. Trust me, you're not going to receive an email from me every day, but you will periodically about any stuff that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, as you guys have experienced yourselves, like she has deep waters and does not share, milk, but can serve up the meat. But is clearly a great communicator. So I've enjoyed everything from her that I've heard. And I hope that you guys have as well. This is clearly a new era, as you heard, that we've entered, and she probably has more revelation ahead. So definitely connect with her there. Come back here. I love doing this. I love connecting to people. I love connecting deeply. I love hearing stories and sharing stories, and anything that I have within me that God's given me, I love to bring forward and share as well. So that's really what we're doing here. Again, thank you, Kerah. I bless your night and your time away from your family. I'm so grateful. And I look forward to being able to be physical together and give you one of those hugs.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. You gotta come to the next immersive.
Hmm. Oh, you don't
That
have
was
to twist my arm. Yeah, you have a beautiful, beautiful space out there in California.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, for sure. Oh, it's gonna happen. We'll be in the same space, and it's gonna be so fun. So, thank you guys for joining, and whoever's watching this. I'm very blessed and honored. Thank you, David. This was an incredible time, and we'll do it again.
It was my pleasure. And you guys, that's all for now. Thank you so much. I bless your time. I hope this encouraged you and your life. And we'll see you next time.